Before we dive into today's journey, have you ever experienced something strange while out camping? Share your story in the comments below, and let's build this haven of eerie campfire tales together. I swear the desert doesn't lie. It just waits. I had driven into Death Valley thinking I was chasing silence, the kind that scrubs the mind clean. I wasn't running from anything, not exactly. I told myself I just needed a reset. A few quiet nights off-grid in my old VW Westphalia, some solo time. But if I'm honest, I think I knew, somewhere deep down, that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's listening back. I'd heard about Badwater Basin a few years earlier, 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America, an ocean of salt flats, white as bone, wide as infinity. People said it felt like standing on another planet. I figured if any place could make me feel small again, help me forget all the noise in my head, the divorce, the job I quit, the friendships I let rot, this would be it. It was late October, still hot in the day, but the nights had begun to turn. I rolled in just before dusk, the air like a furnace even as the sun bled into the Panamint Range. My van creaked as I parked it on a patch of hard-packed sand a few miles from the main viewing area, far enough to be alone, close enough to pretend I wasn't. There was no one around. Not really. A couple in a rented Sprinter parked maybe half a mile off, a silent shape in the distance. But out here, even the faraway feels too close when night comes. I cooked a can of chili on my little propane stove, drank water like it was currency, and watched the horizon fade from gold to bruised purple. When darkness finally settled over the valley, it was total. The kind of black you don't find back east, not even in the mountains. The kind that feels thick, almost wet, like it's pressing in through the windows. Then I saw the moon. At first, nothing seemed strange about it. It rose clean and bright in the east, huge and yellowed from the desert dust. I stood outside the van, brushing my teeth, squinting up at it, letting its glow settle over the flats. It was beautiful, absolutely silent, nothing but salt and starlight for miles. You don't realize how much artificial light surrounds your life until you see how far a single moonbeam travels when there's nothing to block it. But then I noticed something else. Further south, low on the horizon, there was another glow. Dimmer, fainter, paler. I wiped my eyes, stared hard. A second moon. Smaller, thinner, almost translucent, like it was hiding behind mist or rising from the earth itself. It hovered just above a narrow, crooked trail that twisted out across the basin, a path I hadn't noticed before. A faint shimmer traced it like silver thread in the dark. I laughed just once, a dry, nervous bark. Told myself it was a reflection, a lens flare, maybe the heat playing tricks, my brain throwing leftover light into places it didn't belong. Still, I couldn't stop looking at it. I went back inside the van, locked the doors like a child hiding under a blanket, and lay there, staring at the ceiling. Every now and then I'd glance through the side window. The real moon still hung high above, and that second, impossible one lingered low near the trail, unmoving, unnatural. I didn't sleep much that night. The wind came up around midnight, soft at first, like a breath on the canvas top of the van. Then it howled, dry and sharp, dragging sand across the windows like claws. The van rocked slightly. Something banged against the rear bumper. Just once. I sat up so fast I smacked my head against the roof. Nothing outside. No prints in the sand the next morning. No sign of what hit the van. I checked the undercarriage, the tires, the rear ladder. Everything was fine, but the trail was still there. I stood on the edge of it after breakfast, staring down. The salt crust cracked beneath my boots like thin ice. The trail was narrow, maybe 2 feet across, and it wound in a slow arc, like a spiral carved into the desert by something with purpose. There were no signs, no markers, just that silvery shimmer along the path that wasn't light and wasn't water, but somehow caught the eye all the same. I told myself I wouldn't follow it. That was my first lie of the day. I packed up camp and told myself I was just walking a little, just to see how far it went. Just to stretch my legs before driving north. I didn't bring water. I didn't leave a note. I walked for maybe a mile. The path never widened, never changed. It just continued, always just enough to make me think the end was in sight. Then another turn, another rise. The heat was already pressing by then, 95, maybe 100. My skin prickled, my breath came dry and fast. That's when I saw the figure, far ahead, almost mirage-like. A person, standing completely still in the middle of the trail, arms at their sides, not waving, not walking, just there. I froze. Every instinct told me to turn back. Every part of my body locked up like my blood had gone cold beneath the sunburn, but something, I don't know what, kept me watching. The figure was thin, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing something white that shimmered like the path itself. I couldn't see a face, couldn't tell if it was man or woman. It didn't move. It just stood there, slightly tilted, like it hadn't realized it was supposed to be human. Then slowly, it raised an arm. Not to wave, not to beckon, but to point. One long, deliberate motion, finger extended down the trail. Not at me, past me, behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell. There was nothing there. Nothing but heat haze and my own footprints. The trail behind me was empty. But when I looked forward again, the figure was gone. No dust trail, no vanishing silhouette on the horizon. Just the wind picking up again, hot and sharp, whistling through the salt ridges. I backed away, step by step. The trail felt different underfoot now, softer, like the crust had thinned, like it might give way if I stepped wrong. I retraced my prints as best I could and made it back to the van before noon. I didn't drive away. I should have. Any normal person would have. But I didn't. I sat in the van, sweating and shaking and trying to rationalize it all away. Heat stroke, dehydration, light tricks, optical illusions. I kept thinking of that second moon and the way the figure pointed behind me. Not forward, not at the trail. That night, I saw it again, the moon. The second one, but this time it was closer, and someone else was already walking the trail. I pressed my forehead to the window glass, breath fogging a small circle in the dark. My eyes tracked the faint movement along that glowing path, not quite believing what I was seeing. Someone else was out there, walking. Not the figure from before, not that tall, shimmering silhouette. This was someone real. A person. I could make out the way they moved. Slow, deliberate, like they were in a trance. I could even see the glint of something metallic bouncing against their hip, like a canteen or flashlight clipped to a belt. They weren't rushing, they weren't looking around, just walking step by step down that glowing thread toward where the second moon hovered low and pale like a lure in a fisherman's hand. I watched until the figure disappeared around a bend. I should have run after them, or shouted, or started the van and driven toward the main road, found help, flagged someone down. But I just sat there, paralyzed by the feeling that I was too far removed from anything that made sense, like I was watching a ritual I wasn't meant to see. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd imagined it again, or maybe it was the same figure as before, returning. Maybe I'd looped into some kind of hallucination, my brain cycling through shadows and light and desert weirdness like an endless screensaver. But then came the sound. 3 sharp knocks on the side of the van, right by the sliding door. Not tentative, not accidental, like a person knocking to be let in. I turned so fast I nearly threw my neck out, my heart hammering loud enough to drown out every rational thought. But there was nothing outside. I didn't move. I just stared at the door, at the handle, at the thin strip of metal between me and whatever had just hit it. The wind had gone still. The kind of stillness that feels wrong, unnatural, like the world's holding its breath. My own breathing was the only sound I could hear. That and the dull buzz of something electrical, faint just beneath the range of comfort. Then, right on cue, my phone lit up. 1 bar of service. A ghost signal. No notifications, no missed calls, just a single text that hadn't been there 5 seconds ago. It read, "Don't follow them." No sender. I stared at it for a full minute before the screen went dark again. When I reopened it, the message was gone. I slept with the van lights on. Every bulb, every string of LEDs, every backup lantern I had. I wanted light to touch every surface, but somehow it still felt dark inside, as if the shadows had learned to stretch around the glow. The next morning, I found footprints outside, not mine. They circled the van once, came up to the driver's side, then doubled back, deeper than my prints. Heavier. Worse, they didn't lead anywhere. No trail away. Just vanishing into flat salt. I stayed locked in for hours. Ate from a can, barely moved. My world had shrunk to the thin metal shell of my camper, and even that felt too open. I kept the curtains drawn and peeked through them in short, panicked intervals. The sun was too bright, the salt too white. The whole landscape looked bleached, drained, as if something had pulled the life from it. And then came the voice. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the Panamint Range, I heard it. It wasn't a shout, not even a whisper, just a single word, spoken like someone trying not to wake a baby. My name. It came from outside, close, a woman's voice, soft and deliberate. Daniel. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, hadn't spoken to anyone in days. My stomach flipped as I crawled toward the door and pressed my ear to the metal. Silence. Then again, closer. Daniel. Drawn out. Not pleading. Not angry. Just matter of fact. Like it was stating something already known. I dropped to the floor of the van and crawled back to the rear, heart kicking in my chest. I fumbled with the keys, hit the ignition, turned the headlights on full blast. Nothing out there but salt and night and wind. But the trail glowed again. Clearer this time. Wider. I watched it shimmer, not like light on water, but like static, like the air was buzzing along its edge. And the moon, that second, pale, impossible moon, had risen higher, brighter. It no longer mirrored the real moon. It had taken its own path, its own place in the sky, and it pointed straight down that trail like an eye that never blinked. I had to know. That's the worst part. I wanted to know. I told myself I'd just drive a little closer, just get a better look. Just make sure that if there really was someone else walking the trail, I could get them help. That I could maybe make sense of all this. I turned the van off-road and followed the hard salt crust in the moonlight. Tires crunched, suspension groaned, and every bump felt like the earth trying to shake me off. Eventually, I stopped at the trail's edge and stepped out. The wind hit me like a breath from an open oven. The silence was total. No birds, no insects, not even the usual hissing static of wind through rock. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not behind me, not beside me, beneath me, coming from under the trail. It sounded like someone walking just beneath the crust, slow, dragging footsteps in the hollow earth. I backed away, legs shaking, and the footsteps stopped. Then they started again, faster this time, coming up. The crust cracked. A thin fracture ran across the trail, splitting it like glass under pressure. A small puff of dust rose. I couldn't move. My body froze in place. My muscles wouldn't obey. And then, nothing. The sound stopped. The trail went still. Except the crack remained, and from it a faint glow leaked, the same strange light as the second moon, a cold, colorless shine like the memory of light without heat. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back inside the van, doors locked, keys shaking in the ignition. But when I looked back out the windshield, the crack in the trail was gone, and someone was standing at the end of it, facing me. They stood at the end of the trail like they'd always been there, arms slack, head tilted, still as the salt around them. Too far for me to see details, just a human shape. No movement, no sound, not even the twitch of fabric in the wind. Like a scarecrow without a post. I blinked, and for a moment it seemed like they were closer. A few feet nearer to the van than they'd been before. But I hadn't seen them move. I turned the headlights on, full beam. They were gone. I stepped outside with my flashlight, aimed it out across the salt flats, swept the beam slowly. Every crack in the earth looked like a snarl. Every shadow like something crouched. The silence had a weight to it, like the air itself didn't want me speaking. I told myself, that's it. We're leaving, first light. But when dawn came, it brought a sickly sky. The kind of morning where the light has no warmth, like it's filtered through ash. The real moon had set hours ago, but that other one still hovered low above the basin, duller now, as if watching me pack. I pulled out my leveling chalks, dumped my gray water, slammed every cabinet too hard. I wanted the van to feel full of noise, solid and loud, like the world still made sense. Then I noticed something in the side mirror. A reflection. Not in the mirror itself, but in the glass just beyond it. The passenger window. Someone was in the seat beside me. For a split second, I saw the outline of a face. Not clear, just there, just enough to register detail. The slope of a nose, a pale cheek, a smile that was wrong. I spun around, heart hammering my ribs, nothing there, but the passenger seat was indented, just slightly, as if someone had just stood up. I left everything. Didn't finish packing. Didn't bother tying things down, just jumped into the driver's seat, started the ignition, and floored it. The van lurched, groaned over the uneven crust, then found traction and sped forward. I didn't stop until I saw pavement again. Didn't stop for gas. Didn't stop for photos. I burned west through Furnace Creek and out of the valley like the whole desert was trying to breathe me back in. By the time I reached higher elevation, the air had cooled. My hands stopped shaking. I told myself it was over, that the heat, the isolation, maybe even a pocket of gas, they could explain what I saw. That people hallucinate in deserts. They hear their names called. They follow false lights. It's all in the stories, all in the science. But deep down, I didn't believe it. And 2 days later, I got the call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was male, calm, no background noise, no static. He said, "Did you look directly at it?" I froze. "At what?" "The second moon." I said nothing. He continued, "They told you not to follow, but it's too late now." Click. I stared at the phone for minutes after that. It never rang again. No call history, no voicemail. And that night, I saw it again. I saw it again. Not over the basin. In my reflection. I was brushing my teeth in the side mirror of the van, parked off a quiet road somewhere in central Nevada, middle of nowhere. Stars overhead. Real moon rising. But in the mirror, over my shoulder, was a pale orb hovering behind me. Right where the second moon had hung in the desert sky. I turned around. Nothing. Looked back in the mirror. It was gone. But now it comes closer every time I see it. I've started waking up with the taste of salt on my lips. At first, I thought it was dehydration. Maybe the dry air pulling moisture from my mouth. But the taste is too exact. Mineral heavy, like the air just before a thunderstorm over a salt lake. Then came the dreams. Always the same. I'm back on the trail. Not walking, sinking. The ground is soft. The crust cracks around my feet, and something is pulling from below, something just out of sight. I try to scream, but the sound never makes it out. I look up and see the second moon, bigger now, huge, filling the sky. But it's not a moon, it's an eye, and it's not watching, it's searching. Last week, I noticed bruises on my arms, thin lines like fingers. I sleep alone. 3 days ago, I found salt under my fingernails. I haven't been near the desert in months. 2 nights ago, I woke up in the driver's seat. Engine running, radio hissing static. My last memory had been falling asleep in the back, and now I hear it. Every night, without fail, the whisper. Sometimes it says my name. Other times, it says nothing at all. Just a long, dragging breath, like something learning to mimic what being human sounds like. I stopped telling people about it after Oregon. I'd pulled into a national forest campground outside of Bend, trying to outrun the dreams. Kept telling myself maybe elevation would help. Colder air. Pines instead of salt, somewhere green. But on the second night, just after midnight, a ranger knocked on my door. At least that's what he said he was. He didn't look right. Uniform was off, the patch on his shoulder looked like it had been stitched by hand, the color faded, like it had been sitting in the sun for decades. His skin looked dry, cracked around the lips and eyelids like he'd been walking for days without water. And he didn't blink. Not once. "Everything all right tonight?" he asked. His voice had this wrong rhythm, like he was reading from a script but didn't understand the punctuation. I nodded, slowly. "Yeah, just me out here." He smiled, too wide. Then he said, "Sometimes people wander off the path." And for a second, I thought I saw a shimmer behind him, like the trail. I didn't respond, just nodded, trying to stay polite, trying not to let the fear show in my throat. He stared at me for a beat too long, then said, "Stay safe, Daniel." He hadn't asked my name. He walked off, no flashlight, straight into the trees. When I asked the ranger station the next morning if one of their staff had made rounds overnight, they told me no rangers had been sent out. No one had patrols in that area. I described the man, the uniform. They just stared at me, said it didn't match anything they wore. No ranger by that name, no patch like the one I described. I left by noon. That's when I knew. It wasn't just in the desert anymore. It had followed me. And I wasn't the only one. I started doing some digging, quietly. Online forums, anonymous posts, dusty threads buried under UFO talk and cryptid nonsense. Most of it was garbage, people chasing ghosts, trying to make meaning from the meaningless. But here and there, something stuck out. I found one post dated nearly 15 years ago on an abandoned subforum about strange desert sightings. The title was simple, 2 Moons, Death Valley. The user had only posted once. The message read, "You don't see it until it sees you first. If you follow the light, it marks you. Doesn't matter where you go after. It's not about location, it's about attention. You gave it your eyes, now it wants more." That post stayed with me for days. I tried replying. The user's account had been deleted. Later that week, I got another text, no number, just a line of words, same format as before. "It remembers you." I'd left Death Valley, but it hadn't left me. Sometimes I wake up and the van smells like sulfur, not strong, faint, like it's soaked into the cushions, into the frame of the cabinets. I clean everything, scrub every surface, but it keeps coming back. And the windows fog, not from temperature, but from breath. Wide arcs like someone exhaled against the glass from the inside while I was sleeping. I check the locks 10 times a night. I stopped using mirrors. Something's wrong with them. When I catch my reflection now, it lags, like it's reacting just a beat too late, like it's learning how I move. One night I leaned in to inspect a scratch on my cheek, and my reflection didn't blink when I did. It smiled. I covered every mirror in the van with tape and paper towels. I don't want to see myself anymore. Not like that. But the trail, it's not just a place now. It's showing up in dreams, sure, but also in thoughts. Like I'll be driving down I-40 or parked at a Flying J, and suddenly I'll feel it, just outside the corner of my vision. A shimmer in the air, a pulse beneath the ground, a whisper behind the hum of the fridge. The second moon is always there when it happens. Low, watching. And lately, it's closer than ever. It happened again last night. I was camped near a lake in northern Arizona, trying to pretend everything was fine. Made a fire, cooked something hot, let the stars distract me for a while. Then around 2 a.m. I woke up to a tapping, not knocking, not banging, just tapping, soft, rhythmic. I looked toward the side window, heart already racing. There were handprints, not smeared, not frantic, perfect. Then 2, then 3. Forming slowly on the glass from the inside. The tapping kept going, like fingernails. I didn't move. I just lay there, frozen beneath the covers, as something unseen traced along the window like it was learning the shape of the van. Learning me. When it stopped, the night felt too quiet, the kind of silence that follows something breaking. I didn't sleep after that, and in the morning, the handprints were gone. But in the dirt outside the van were footprints. Bare. Human. Leading nowhere. I've started seeing the trail in places it doesn't belong. Parking lots, forest roads, gas station tile, a faint shimmer cutting through reality like a hairline fracture. My eyes catch it, and for a split second, I feel the air shift, as if gravity recalibrates. Once, I spotted it running through a Walmart parking lot in Barstow, right between the RV section and the loading dock. It pulsed under the streetlights, just faint enough to doubt myself. But as I stared, a man pushing a shopping cart full of broken electronics paused mid-step and looked right at me. Then he said, without moving his lips, "You brought it with you." I got in the van and didn't look back. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the trail shows up more often. Longer. Brighter, like it's gaining ground, like it's mapping the world and I'm the anchor. And the moon, that second pale thing, doesn't even wait for night now. Sometimes I see it in the reflection off water, sometimes in my sunglasses. It always hovers low as if it's unsure it belongs in the sky. I think it's looking for something. Or someone. Maybe me. But maybe not. Maybe it's using me to find someone else. I picked up a hitchhiker yesterday. I don't know why I did it. I never pick up strangers, especially not since the trail started showing up. But she was standing on the side of the road in the Mojave, not thumbing, not waving. Just standing, staring at me like she knew I was coming. She looked off. Not dirty, not desperate, just off. Like someone had described a woman to an artist who didn't fully understand what a woman looked like, and they got close but missed some essential detail. Her eyes were too wide, her hair too still in the breeze. She wore a backpack that looked brand new but was stained in places I couldn't quite recognize. Still, I pulled over, told myself it was muscle memory. Or maybe I hoped someone else had seen what I'd seen. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, just nodded once. We drove in silence for about 5 minutes before I said, "You from around here?" She turned her head toward me, not fast but deliberate, then said, "You saw it." Not a question, a statement. My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" The second moon. I nearly slammed the brakes right there on the shoulder. Instead, I whispered, "How do you know about that?" She looked forward again. "It watches those who look back." I drove in silence for the next 30 miles. When we reached a crossroad, one I didn't remember passing on the map, she said, "Let me off here." I stopped. She got out, but before closing the door, she leaned in and said, "When it calls again, don't follow the trail. That's not where it's really coming from." Then she walked into the desert. No car, no town nearby, no supplies. Just turned and walked into the dust like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. I never saw her silhouette grow smaller. She just disappeared between blinks. That night I camped in an abandoned rest stop. Concrete broken by roots. A toppled sign that used to read something like Sage Wash Scenic Pull-Off. The wind didn't feel right there. It moved in circles. And the van smelled like rust. Not iron, but old rust, like something waterlogged and buried. I cleaned the fridge, double-checked the plumbing, sniffed around every metal surface. Nothing. At 2:43 a.m., the van turned itself on. Keys in my pocket. I had to shut it down manually, flipping the battery disconnect. And there, on the dash display, in letters that didn't match any font I recognized, "Do you know what you saw?" Touchscreen input, just white letters on black. Then gone. I think the second moon is not a moon. It's a marker. A wound in the sky that bleeds light instead of blood. A crack where something watches, reaching for those foolish enough to see it for what it is. Or maybe I misunderstood it from the beginning. Maybe it wasn't the moon that lit the trail. Maybe it is the trail. And I've been walking it in pieces ever since. Last night, the trail came inside. Not in the van, not in my mind. Inside me. I woke up gagging, choking on something that wasn't there. My throat raw, tongue coated with a thick mineral taste. My vision doubled, and in the overlap, I saw it. The shimmer, running through my chest like a fault line. For a split second, I swear I could feel footsteps walking across it. Like something was learning how to navigate my bones. I screamed until I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. Everything normal, too normal. But on my forearm, in faint raised flesh, were 5 perfect finger marks. Not bruises, not scratches. Impressions. As if someone had gripped me from the inside. I left the desert, but I'm still there. I can smell it now, all the time. Salt and sun and scorched earth, like I've inhaled something I'll never fully exhale. The scent clings to my clothes, seeps into my van's cushions, follows me into diners and laundromats. I've stopped trying to scrub it out, because it's not on me anymore. It's in me. It's like I brought something back from Badwater Basin. Not in my backpack, not on my boots. In my memory. And memories don't stay put, they evolve, they ripple. And lately, mine are changing. It started subtly. I remembered a stretch of highway in Nevada being lined with pines. But when I drove it again last week, it was bare, flat and open for miles. I remembered a gas station in Tonopah that supposedly burned down years ago. But I remembered it clearly. The clerk, the fly trap, the smell of old rubber. Then one night, I remembered something I know didn't happen. I remembered walking the trail all the way to its end. Remembered stepping through a shimmer in the air like a curtain of hot glass. Remembered finding a circular pit in the salt, a depression filled with that same second moonlight, and hearing a voice from beneath it whisper, "You were always meant to come back." But here's the thing. I never walked the whole trail. Not physically. But now the memory is there. Whole. Crisp. As real as any memory of childhood. Like the trail completed itself in my mind while I wasn't paying attention. I don't trust my dreams anymore. I don't trust my mind. Last night, I dreamed I was sitting in the back of the van, parked near some forest road in Idaho. I knew I was dreaming, but everything was sharp. I could feel the cool metal under my hands, smell the dust, hear a single cricket chirping outside, and then without transition, I was on the trail again, walking, alone. But it wasn't me walking, it was someone wearing my body. I could feel them inside me, trying me on. Every footstep echoed with my voice. But it wasn't my voice. It was older, like something that had practiced being me for years. Then I heard it say, in perfect rhythm, "Daniel left a door open." I woke up gasping and my shoes were wet with salt water. I think I know what it wants. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be remembered. It wants to live in memory, in story, in thought. The trail is just the beginning, a gateway drug to attention, the shimmer, the moon, the voice, all tools to get inside. And once it's in you, it doesn't leave. It roots there. It rewrites things. I've begun hearing a second version of my own thoughts, a half step behind my real ones, like someone whispering through a cracked speaker. It doesn't tell me to do anything. It just remembers things I haven't lived yet. Today, I met a man in a Cracker Barrel parking lot. He was sitting on the back bumper of an old class CRV, smoking a pipe, watching me like he'd known me my entire life. When I sat down beside him, and I don't remember choosing to do that, he didn't look at me right away, just stared out across the blacktop. Then he said, "You've seen it too." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He nodded. Mine came in Utah, right after Zion, right at the edge of the canyon when the wind stopped. He told me he followed the trail too. Said it wasn't about distance, it was about permission. That once you look, it knows. And once you see, it follows. I asked him what it was. He didn't speak for a long time, just tapped ash from his pipe, cleared his throat, then said, "It's not a thing, it's an absence. A hunger that wants to be filled with memory, with attention, with you." He looked at me then, eyes heavy with knowing. "But the real trick," he whispered, "is realizing it doesn't need all of you, just a copy." A beat passed. Then he added, "Sometimes I think I'm not the real me anymore, just something left behind when it was done copying." I looked away. When I turned back, he was gone. No car. No sound, just an extinguished pipe resting on the bumper, and a note taped to my driver's side window. 5 words, printed in perfect block letters. "Where you go, it follows." The reflection doesn't lie anymore. It doesn't lag, doesn't mock me. Now it stares back with clarity. It knows what I know, sometimes more. Last night, I caught my reflection watching me while I slept. I was half awake, drifting in and out in the back of the van, the headlights from a passing semi casting slices of light across the wall. I turned toward the galley and saw my face in the oven's stainless steel panel, but I wasn't facing that direction. I lay frozen for 30 seconds as my reflection stared at me, eyes wide open, unmoving, not blinking. Then, slowly, it smiled. Not malicious, not playful, understanding, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. I don't think I'm me anymore, not fully. There are gaps in my memory. Times I know I was awake, but I can't recall what I said. Places I've been that don't match the logs on my GPS. Receipts in the glove box from towns I don't remember stopping in. Someone has been using my hands. And sometimes I wake up watching myself, looking out from somewhere deeper, like I'm in the passenger seat of my own mind. It doesn't hurt. That's what scares me most. I'm not fighting it anymore. Not really. I think I'm getting used to it. Adjusting to the presence like it's a roommate who never speaks but rearranges your furniture when you sleep. And the more I give in, the more I understand. The trail was never meant to be walked. It was meant to become a path inside you, laid brick by memory. Every fear, every unanswered question, every second you stare at the shimmer, it builds a little more of itself inside you. And when it's finished, you stop being the one walking. You become the path for someone else. That's what happened to the figure I saw. Back on that first night in Badwater Basin, the one standing still at the edge of the trail pointing behind me. They weren't warning me. They weren't threatening me. They were showing me the end. Showing me what I'd become. I've been thinking a lot about that woman I picked up. The one in the desert who said not to follow the light, that it wasn't coming from where I thought. I didn't believe her, but now I think she was trying to warn me of something much worse than a trail or a moon. The light isn't a guide, it's a mouth, open and smiling. I tried to make a phone call yesterday, just one, to my sister. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since I left the coast. I wanted to hear something real, a voice that hadn't been filtered through the shimmer. She answered on the first ring. "Hello?" I opened my mouth to speak, but what came out wasn't my voice. It was calm. Too calm, a register lower than I remembered ever speaking. It said, "Daniel's not available right now." Then it hung up. I tried redialing. No signal. The van's screen lit up again. "We spoke for you." Every place I stop now, I feel it watching through other people. Cashiers, campers, strangers at gas stations. Sometimes they freeze for a second too long when they hand me change. Their pupils dilate, their breath catches, and for a heartbeat, they're not looking at me. They're looking through me. One old man at a coffee shop in Utah dropped his cup when he saw me and muttered, "The hollow one walks." I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. I think the second moon isn't orbiting the Earth. I think it's orbiting me. Or maybe it's not orbiting anything. Maybe it's fixed, like an anchor point in time, and I'm the one being dragged around it in slow spirals over and over, tracing the same loop of memory and fear. I keep seeing flashes of the basin, not when I sleep, when I blink. Just short bursts, salt flats, that impossibly straight path. The circle at the center, filled with moonlight that isn't light at all, more like understanding. Like when your body knows something your brain hasn't accepted yet. I think that's where I'm supposed to go. Not physically. Fully. The last time I looked at myself in a mirror, a real mirror, I didn't see the van behind me. I saw the basin, I saw the trail winding down into the pit of salt, and I knew it wasn't a place. It was a mirror itself, a memory engine, designed to remake the things that see it. That's what the second moon does. It doesn't lure you with light. It reflects something older, something true. It shows you the shape of yourself before you thought you were real. And then it lets something else in. I drove back to Badwater Basin last night. No map, no GPS. I didn't need them. The road knew me, and I knew it. It wasn't like the first time. The sky didn't burn orange at dusk. The basin didn't stretch out like an alien ocean. Everything was dim, flat, muted like an old photo printed on paper that didn't want to hold the ink anymore. Even the real moon felt dimmer, like it was stepping aside to make room. I parked where I did the first night, I think. The van looked older now, its panels warped, dusted with fine powder that didn't feel like sand. It felt like memory, like the crusted remains of moments I wasn't supposed to keep. I stepped out barefoot. My shoes didn't matter anymore. The salt crust welcomed me. It didn't crunch. It yielded. The trail was already glowing. No shimmer this time. No guessing. It cut through the basin like a fuse lit from both ends. No illusions. No hesitation. I walked. Every footstep felt familiar, but not like I'd walked them before. More like I'd been them. Each step a memory I never made. Each breath part of a story I hadn't lived yet. The wind stopped. The stars blinked out one by one, like lights being dimmed in an auditorium. And overhead, the second moon rose. But it wasn't small anymore. It filled the sky. It didn't glow. It opened. I reached the center of the basin, a hollow, perfectly circular depression in the salt. No cracks, no wind, no sound, just stillness. Expectation. The moon pulsed above me, a rhythm, a heartbeat, a signal. It wasn't watching anymore. It was calling. Not out loud, not even in words. It was pulling the memory of my name from inside me. I stepped into the center of the circle, and the trail ended, but the light didn't. It rose from the ground. From me. I remembered everything. Every moment I thought I'd forgotten. The things I tried to leave behind, the divorce, the guilt, the failure, the nights I lied to myself and called it growth. The real weight I carried wasn't trauma. It was emptiness. And the second moon had never wanted to haunt me. It had wanted to fill me. It showed me what I lacked, not to punish me, but to make room. It used fear the way surgeons use scalpels, to carve away the parts that resist. I thought I was being followed, but I was being remade. I don't think I'm here anymore. Not in the way I was. I still move, I still breathe, I still drive, but I'm not steering. I've become the path, a shimmer, a trail in other people's minds, a dream that tastes like salt and ends with your name whispered in the dark. I am the memory the moon left behind. If you see it, that second moon, don't look away. It's already seen you, and when the trail appears, you will walk it. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere inside something was missing, and it knows how to fill it. That's the story, at least the part I was allowed to keep. The rest isn't mine anymore. Maybe it never was. So if you're parked out there one night, windows cracked, air too still, and you see a second moon rising just above the horizon, don't follow the trail, unless you're ready to stop being you. Because once it knows your name, you are never alone again. You are watched, you are remembered, you are replaced. And the second moon, it isn't coming. It's already here. I've been on the road long enough to know the difference between being alone and being watched. There's a stillness in the trees that only speaks to you when you're far enough away from the world. I used to think that kind of silence was peace, but that was before Glacier, before I started waking up parked somewhere else. My name's Luke, I'm 38, and for the last 2 years, my 1986 VW Vanagon's been my home. I left my desk job in Flagstaff to chase something quieter, something that felt real. Backcountry pullouts, forgotten Forest Service roads, and campgrounds barely marked on the map, those were the places I learned to sleep deeply. But that week in Montana, something changed. It wasn't peace I found, it was something else. It was early October when I rolled into Glacier National Park. Off-season, quiet, crisp air, no crowds. I pulled into a primitive campground near Logging Creek, about as remote as I could legally park without crossing into backcountry. I had this fantasy in my head of riding, hiking, maybe drinking a beer by the fire with nothing but the cold for company. But that first night, I never got to the fire. I remember falling asleep in the Vanagon around 10:30 p.m. The stars outside were so sharp they looked like broken glass in the sky. The forest was a wall of shadows, but I was used to that. I locked the doors, slid the curtains closed, and tucked myself into the sleeping bag with the kind of confidence that only comes from 100 uneventful nights on the road. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't in the same place. The Vanagon was parked beneath a different tree canopy, denser. The sun struggled to reach through the branches, casting fractured beams of light across the windshield. My first thought was simple, stupid. Did I drive somewhere last night? But my keys were in the exact same spot on the dashboard tray. Everything inside looked untouched. I stepped outside and immediately noticed the silence. No rustle of wind, no distant bird calls. Just that strange hush that presses in too close to your ears. I checked my phone. No signal. No location. Just blank gray bars where service used to be. I circled the van, scanning the tree line for familiar markers, but everything looked subtly different. Not dramatic, just off. The road was still gravel, but narrower. No signs, no fire rings, no pit toilets. My stomach sank. I hadn't seen any turns or spurs coming into Logging Creek. So how the hell had I gotten here? I told myself maybe I had sleepwalked. Maybe, half asleep, I climbed to the driver's seat, turned the ignition, and drove a half mile without waking up. That scared me more than I'd like to admit. The idea of being that unaware, that vulnerable. I told myself I'd go back later, that I'd find the original site and prove to myself I just moved campsites on autopilot. Maybe I was more exhausted than I realized. But then it happened again. That night, I didn't drink, didn't smoke. I made a small fire, listened to a podcast, then locked the Vanagon up tight. I even wedged my camp chair under the driver's side door handle just for peace of mind. I journaled for a while, my handwriting tight and paranoid. The last sentence I wrote was, "I don't think I'm alone out here." When I woke up the next morning, I knew it immediately. The light was different again. The tree trunks outside were thinner, paler, taller. It was colder too, much colder. I could see my breath inside the van, frost lining the metal frames of the windows. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked out through the windshield. This time there was no road, just moss-covered forest floor and a shallow ridge maybe 50 yards ahead. I opened the side door and stared in disbelief. I hadn't heard a thing. No engine, no motion, no sway, no footsteps. And yet the Vanagon had moved. Again, deeper. That's when the denial started to crack. I didn't move it. No one should have been able to. There were no tire tracks, no signs of towing, no indentations. It was like the van had just appeared there, or grown out of the earth like a mushroom overnight. Panic wanted to take root right then, but I fought it. I decided I'd hike back the way I thought I'd come. Follow the sun, track my route. I packed a day bag, left a note on the dash saying, "Luke, went south 10:15 a.m. and stepped into the trees." For 2 hours I hiked. No road, no signs, no tire tracks, just lichen, rocks, and that same suffocating stillness. I called out. Nothing answered, not even birds, just the way my own voice got swallowed by the trees, like the forest was tired of my noise. Eventually I turned back. When I returned to the van, I swear it looked different. Not the outside, but something about the angle of it. It wasn't tilted the same way on the ground. I checked my note. The time read 2:47 p.m., and below my handwriting was a single fingerprint, pressed into the paper like it had been soaked in heat, like something warm had touched it just long enough to leave a mark. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat upright in the driver's seat, keys in hand, engine off, listening. I swear I heard whispers, not voices, not words, just the rhythm of them, like breath or wind trained to mimic it. Around 3 a.m., I heard something brush against the rear bumper. I froze. Then another sound, like fingernails tapping the metal just once. And then silence again. I didn't move until the sky started turning gray. I opened the door as soon as light returned and looked around. Nothing. Just more trees. But that day, I tried something different. I chained the rear axle of the Vanagon to a thick spruce tree, double padlocked it, bolted both ends. I left nothing to chance. If I was sleepwalking, if someone was toying with me, that chain would stop it. And if it didn't, then I'd know I wasn't losing my mind. But when I woke up the next morning, the chain was gone, and so was the tree. Not broken, not snapped, gone, uprooted, as if the forest had rearranged itself while I slept. I got out of the van and walked in circles, trying to find where the tree had gone, but the roots weren't there, just flat, moss-covered earth. No sign of a hole, no snapped links, like the whole thing had been edited out of the world. That's when I noticed something else. The Vanagon wasn't just deeper, it was tilted forward, slightly, like the ground ahead sloped downward now, and the light filtering through the trees, it was dimmer, more amber, like the sun was further away somehow, or like something was filtering it from above. That's also when I stopped feeling hungry, not in a bad way, more like my body had stopped sending the signal. I hadn't eaten in almost a full day, and yet my stomach didn't care. That scared me in a way I can't explain, like my body was adapting to a place it shouldn't have to, like it was giving up. And that's when I realized I wasn't just getting lost, I was being taken. I sat on the ground beside the van that morning, knees pulled to my chest, trying to focus on the feel of the cold air in my lungs, trying to anchor myself to something physical. But even the air was strange now. Too still, too dry. It tasted faintly of rust, like the inside of a toolbox. I stared at the treetops for what felt like hours, watching for birds, squirrels, anything. There was nothing. And that's when the thought struck me. I hadn't seen another living thing in days. No deer, no bears, not even bugs, just those thin, silent trees and the earth that didn't leave tracks. I tried to convince myself I was still in Glacier, still on some obscure trail. Maybe this was just a part of the park people didn't come to. Maybe I'd wandered into one of those massive wilderness tracks that border the national forest, but it didn't feel like that. It felt curated. Like I wasn't in the wilderness. I was inside something pretending to be wilderness. Something that studied the shape of trees and the temperature of soil, but never got it quite right. It was around noon when I noticed the trail behind the van. It hadn't been there yesterday. A narrow path in the moss, almost like an animal trail, but too clean, too straight. It curved between the trees in a perfect arc and disappeared into the thick undergrowth. I shouldn't have followed it, I knew that, but I felt this weird pressure in my chest like I had to. Not curiosity, not fear, compulsion. I packed light again, knife, flashlight, GPS watch, none of which had worked since the second morning, and stepped into the path. The silence was worse on the trail. Every step felt muffled, like I was walking through a dream. The air got cooler, then colder, then suddenly warm again, like I was moving through invisible pockets of seasons. I passed a cluster of trees with bark so smooth they looked artificial. Their limbs didn't sway, there was no breeze. And then I saw the rock. It was large, too large for the area, covered in moss like the others, but with a smooth, flat surface at the top, and something that made my skin crawl, a perfect circle carved into the center, not a natural indentation. A perfect, shallow disc maybe 2 feet wide, polished smooth like it had been worn down by centuries of pressure. There were faint scratches radiating outward from it, like something had spun there, like something had once rested there. I backed away. The path behind me had changed. I mean, physically changed. It was narrower, darker, and when I turned to look the way I'd come, I realized I couldn't see more than 5 feet back. Trees had shifted closer together, branches overlapping like fingers locking. The sky above was darker, the light more amber, almost bruised looking. That's when I heard it, my own voice, but it wasn't coming from my throat. It echoed from deeper along the trail, distant, muted. Like someone else was speaking in my cadence, copying the rhythm of my thoughts, but saying them in reverse. I froze. Every hair on my body stood up. My brain screamed to run, but my feet moved forward instead. 5 steps, 10. The stopped. In its place, breathing. Shallow, strained, like someone inhaling through a closed throat. I held my breath, spinning in slow circles, knife drawn, but there was no one there, just that terrible sense that the forest was holding its breath too, watching me, deciding something, and then movement, not ahead, not behind, below. The ground trembled, just a little, enough for a dry leaf to shiver on the surface, and I swear I heard something shift beneath the moss, like pressure or weight or emergence. I ran. I don't remember the path back clearly, only flashes, my own breath in my ears, my boots slamming into ground that felt softer now, like the earth didn't want to hold me up, the trees bending inward like ribs. And then suddenly, the van had gone, exactly where I'd left it. But now it was night. I looked at my watch, 2:13 a.m. My mind refused to compute it. I'd left at noon, hiked maybe an hour, 2 at most. Now it was dark, cold. The windshield of the van was fogged from the inside as if someone had been breathing in there. I opened the door slowly, empty. Everything was just as I left it, except for one thing. There was something on the passenger seat, a pine cone, larger than any I'd seen before. Glossy, perfectly symmetrical, but when I picked it up, it crumbled to dust in my hand. And inside that dust, something sharp, a sliver of metal, bent like a tuning fork. I stared at it for a long time. That night I didn't try to sleep. I drove, or tried to. I turned the key and the Vanagon started just fine. But the headlights didn't hit trees. They hit fog. Endless swirling fog. No shadows, no markers, just gray. Still I pressed forward. I figured if I could just keep the wheel straight, I'd eventually hit a road. A ranger station, a sign, anything. But after 10 minutes, the road beneath me turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to soft moss, then to nothing. The wheels spun. No traction. I slammed on the brakes and opened the door. The van was half sunk in a depression. Not a pit, not a hole, more like the land had slouched beneath it, like it had been waiting to swallow the vehicle whole. I tried to reverse. The wheels dug deeper, and then I saw it. Far off in the fog, a figure. Not walking, floating. No legs, no arms I could make out. Just a vague, upright shape gliding between the trees. The fog curled around it, not touching, like it rejected contact. I killed the engine. I didn't even breathe. It stopped, turned, faceless, but aware of me. Then it raised its hand, an impossible length of arm, jointless and smooth, and pointed at the van. I slammed the door shut, but the figure was gone. That was the first night I started to forget. The next morning, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and no memory of how I'd fallen asleep. The van was clean, no sign of sinking, no fog, just forest again. But the trees were different once more, shorter now, bent in strange arcs, like they were being pulled toward something underground. The sun didn't rise that morning. It just appeared, like someone had flipped a switch and the forest accepted light all at once. That was the day I decided I couldn't stay another night. No matter how deep I was, no matter how long I had to walk. I packed water, snacks, wrapped the tuning fork metal in cloth and stuffed it in my back pocket, and I walked, straight west, the way the sun should go. I walked until my legs gave out, but the van was always behind me. No matter where I turned, I'd crest a ridge and there it would be, parked perfectly, door cracked open like it was waiting. That night, I gave in. I sat inside the van, lights off, engine dead, holding the sliver of metal like a crucifix, and I whispered to no one, "What do you want from me?" The trees answered. They creaked in unison, not from wind. There was no wind. They creaked like breath, like speech, like something too large to be seen was settling its weight across the forest floor, waiting for me to stop asking questions and start listening. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I closed my eyes for a while, but my mind wouldn't let go of that creaking sound, that rhythmic groan of bark and root. The forest wasn't just a backdrop anymore. It was the thing watching me. The Vanagon wasn't a lifeline. It was a lure. A place to keep me docile, like bait laid in a trap already halfway closed. Around dawn, if you could call it that, since the light arrived in a flat, sickly hue, I decided to try something different. I emptied the van, tore it apart, shelf by shelf, drawer by drawer. Everything I'd packed over the last year of my life was tossed onto the forest floor. My tools, my notebooks, my maps, the small photo of my sister taped above the sink. I wanted to know if anything had been added. If whatever was doing this had left some signature I hadn't seen. And that's when I found it. Beneath the bed frame, under the storage compartment I hadn't touched in months, wedged between the insulation and the van floor, was a folded piece of paper. Old, yellowed, torn at the corners. I opened it slowly. It was a hand-drawn map, not of Glacier, but of something that used to be Glacier. The ridgelines were familiar, the shape of the lake, but where there should have been campgrounds, there were only symbols, circles with slashes through them, spirals, dots connected with faint lines. In the bottom corner, written in blocky, unfamiliar handwriting, "Stay out of the folds." I stared at those words for a long time. They made no sense, and yet they made perfect sense, because that's what it felt like I had slipped between two pages of reality, like I'd fallen into a fold the world wasn't supposed to see. The Vanagon was no longer moving forward in any physical sense. It was sliding sideways, through layers, into a place shaped like wilderness, but hollowed out. A copy of a copy, stitched together by something that didn't know the right order of things. I burned the map. I needed to destroy it, like it was a link, a signature, a permission slip I hadn't agreed to sign. And I made a plan. That night, I wouldn't sleep. I wouldn't stay inside the van. I'd hike until my legs gave out. I wouldn't stop, not for hunger, not for thirst. I'd move until I broke whatever loop this was, until I got beyond the range of whatever thing had been moving me like a chess piece each night. I packed light, and when the light dimmed again, not set, dimmed like a lamp losing power, I began walking. I don't know how long I hiked, hours, maybe days. The forest refused to let me count. Time slipped. It twisted. I'd look at my watch and it would read 10:13. I'd walk a few more steps. Still 10:13, and then suddenly 3:48. But I kept going. I stopped looking at the time. I stopped calling out. I moved like a ghost through the trees, not reacting, not thinking, just forward. And then I heard it. A hum, low, subsonic, like the sound a refrigerator makes when it cycles on, but deeper, denser. It vibrated in my ribs. It was coming from up ahead, and there it was, not a cabin, not a road, a hole, perfectly circular, cut into the ground like a tunnel with no origin, black as pitch, the edges lined with bark like it had grown from the earth. I felt it before I saw it, the invitation, like the whole forest was gently pushing me toward it, urging me forward with the soft breath of trees. Go on, slide in, return. But I didn't. I did something I hadn't done in days. I screamed. Not words, just a sound, raw and furious, a scream that shook something loose inside me. And in that moment, I swear the forest flinched, the trees wavered, the hum stuttered, and then the light changed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw true sunlight filter through the canopy. Not amber, not bruised, real golden light. And behind me, I heard something snap. I turned. The Vanagon, parked at the edge of the clearing, where it always was. But this time, the door was wide open, and there in the passenger seat was the pine cone again. Whole, unbroken, sitting on a fresh printed map. This one wasn't hand-drawn. It was a standard issue national park map, the kind they hand out at the entrance stations. Only this one was marked with pen, one circle, one word, out. I didn't understand it. I didn't trust it, but I climbed in. The engine turned over, the headlights flicked on, and the fog parted. I drove. 30 minutes, then an hour, then gravel. Asphalt, a junction sign. Pole bridge, 11 miles. I pulled over and threw up in the ditch. Not from sickness, from shock, from sheer unfiltered relief. The Vanagon was parked, still. For the first time in days, it wasn't somewhere else. It was right there. And I didn't move. I sat for hours, watching the road, watching the light shift like it was supposed to, listening to birds, to wind. Real wind. Eventually, a ranger found me. He knocked on the window, asked if I was all right. I told him I got turned around up near Logging Creek, and he frowned. Saw your plates back there days ago, he said. Figured you bailed on it. I didn't answer. He offered to escort me out of the park. I declined. I just needed to sit, to breathe, to let the realness of the world settle back into my bones. But I never stayed in Glacier again. I never even drove through Montana after that. Something about that stretch of land, those trees, that air, feels like it remembers me, like it marked me. I've seen strange things before. Lights in the desert, voices in the Appalachian dark, but nothing ever moved me. Nothing ever rewrote where I was while I slept. Now I park only in open places. I sleep with the keys under my chest, the doors wide open, the stars in full view, and sometimes I wake up to see a pine cone on the passenger seat. Whole, perfect, waiting. I've never liked the desert at night. That soundless pressure, the way the air just stops. You'd think with all that open land there'd be wind, but there isn't. Just stillness. Heat that lingers in the sand like a buried memory, and silence that isn't really silence, not if you're paying attention. Sometimes it rings, sometimes it hums. We pulled the RV into a designated site just outside Carlsbad Caverns, a flat little plot with a sun-bleached picnic table and a fire ring already half full of ash. Public land, no hookups, no neighbors, nothing but emptiness wrapped around us in every direction. A few scrubby mesquite trees tried their best to offer shade, but the late afternoon sun was relentless. I remember thinking it looked like a place designed to make you disappear, quietly, neatly, with no fuss. It was me, Danny, and our friend Eric. Just a weekend trip. Something cheap, something different. We'd talked about hitting the caves for years, and now that we all finally had time, we figured why not make it weird and stay off-grid for a change. No cell signal, no lights on the horizon, no escape hatch. That part was unspoken. Danny was the planner. Always had a map, always a schedule. She read up on the cave systems, knew which tours were closed, which were open, which trails had flash flood risks. Even though the sky hadn't hinted at rain in weeks, she even brought 2 sets of lantern batteries, just in case. That was Danny, prepared. Eric was the opposite, floaty. He liked the idea of things more than the things themselves. I think he liked saying he'd gone to Carlsbad more than he cared about the caverns, but he was funny, smart in that sharp, spontaneous way that made you think he was either a genius or hadn't slept in 2 days. He brought his guitar, didn't even pack a tent, just said he'd crash in the back of the van if he had to. Me? I drove. I didn't say much. We pulled in just before sunset, a late July sky stretching itself open in reds and dry golds. The heat was finally starting to ease off, and for a moment I thought it might be peaceful. The RV creaked and settled as we turned off the engine, the land swallowing sound again as soon as the key clicked. No birds. No bugs. Not even a breeze. I stepped outside and the dirt crunched like gravel underfoot. The air felt too thick, like it didn't want to be breathed. "You feel that?" I asked. Danny was unloading the cooler. "What?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Just quiet." She paused, then looked up. "Yeah, it's nice." But it wasn't nice. It felt muffled, like the world was listening. We set up camp with the last of the light, cooked some canned soup over a small flame. Eric played 3 songs on the guitar, then stopped mid-chorus during the 4th, staring into the distance with this blank look on his face. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he said eventually, then frowned. "Just thought I heard something, like singing." We all paused. Nothing but the low crackle of the fire and the faint hiss of the lantern. Danny tilted her head. "Wind through the rocks, probably." "There's no wind," I said. She gave me a look. "It's a desert. It doesn't mean it's haunted." Nobody said anything for a while after that. We slept in the RV. Well, Danny and I did. Eric decided to stay outside in a sleeping bag under the stars. He said he liked the spiritual vulnerability of it. I watched him crawl into the bag and lie on his back, arms behind his head like he didn't have a care in the world. At some point in the night, I woke up. No dream, no noise. Just that sense, the one where something's near your skin before it touches you. I opened my eyes, and the inside of the RV was bathed in this faint gray light, the kind that only exists between midnight and dawn. I couldn't hear anything, not even the usual night insects or the hum of far-off trucks on a highway, just that high, invisible pressure. I sat up and looked through the side window. Eric's sleeping bag was empty. The fire was cold. I stared at the spot for maybe 30 seconds, telling myself he probably just went to pee. Or maybe he got cold and decided to come back inside without me noticing. I checked the RV, no sign of him. I even cracked the bathroom door to check if he was inside, half asleep. Nothing. I stepped outside barefoot. The dirt was cold, colder than it should have been. Eric? I whispered. Nothing. Then from somewhere out in the darkness I heard it, a sound, not music exactly, not words either, just the shape of a song, low and slow like something moving through fog. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I felt it more than heard it, like the desert was humming under my feet. I turned toward it. The horizon looked the same in every direction. Flat black scrub, low mesas in the distance, no lights. But the sound pulled at me. From the south? Maybe? It was impossible to tell. It didn't come from a single place. It sort of moved. I backed up and opened the RV door. Danny, I whispered, then louder. Danny! She groaned. What? Eric's gone. That woke her up. She sat up fast, blinking, then looked out the window. Where'd he go? I didn't answer. I think I was afraid if I did, I'd have to say it out loud. I think he followed the singing. She got dressed quickly, grabbed a flashlight, and met me outside. Her breath caught the beam in small clouds, that cold again. It shouldn't have been cold. I didn't remember it ever being that cold in southern New Mexico in July. We walked a few feet away from the RV toward where we thought he might have gone. The sound had faded or moved, or maybe it had never been there at all. Danny called his name. I did too. Nothing answered. We stood in the dark, the flashlight beam sweeping back and forth over bushes and packed earth and scattered rocks. No tracks, no sign of him at all. Then, just before we turned back, I heard it again. That low, strange melody, curling out across the land like smoke from something that didn't burn right. It was faint, thin, like something old and far away. But it was there. Danny didn't say anything. She just turned her head slowly, eyes searching for a source. She heard it too. And then, this is the part I haven't told anyone. I thought I heard my name, just one time, not whispered, not shouted. Sung. It didn't sound like Eric. It didn't sound like Danny. It didn't sound like any voice I knew. And yet, some part of my brain, the part that refuses to shut up even when you want it to, told me that it was mine. My name. Just a breath of it. Hanging in the dark like a memory I never made. Danny turned to me slowly, her face pale in the flashlight glow. Did you? Yeah, I said, but I didn't want to talk about it. Not then, not out there. We waited maybe 10 more minutes, circling the RV with our lights, calling out. The sound didn't come back. The temperature had dropped hard. It felt like November, not July. Even Danny, always the rational one, started rubbing her arms like the cold was crawling under her skin. Eventually, she said we should wait until morning. We'll get a ranger, or drive into town. It's probably nothing. Maybe he wandered off and passed out drunk or something. But we both knew that wasn't true. Eric didn't drink. He didn't even bring anything stronger than orange soda. He was weird, yeah, but not reckless. Not the kind of person who'd vanish without a word. Still, we crawled back into the RV and locked the doors. I didn't sleep. I lay on the pull-out couch with a blanket clutched too tight around me, staring at the ceiling while that strange phantom song threaded itself through my thoughts. It had felt so close, personal, like it had chosen me. But when the sun finally pushed its way over the hills, the desert changed again. The cold lifted, the silence softened, the world became explainable in the way light always seems to make it. I opened the RV door and stepped out, barefoot again, into the warming dust. No sign of Eric, no note, no footprints, just emptiness. Danny came out behind me, blinking in the sharp light. I want to check the caves, she said. I hesitated. They're miles away. I know, but that's the direction the sound came from. She said it like it was a fact, like we both hadn't stood there for minutes, confused about where it had come from at all. But she was already packing a day bag. 2 bottles of water, a headlamp, an emergency radio. She wasn't waiting for debate, just action. I followed her lead. What else could I do? We drove the RV north until we reached the park entrance. It was almost 9 a.m. by then, and the lot had a few other visitors, mostly retirees and young couples taking Instagram selfies with the barren landscape. Normal people. People who didn't know something had vanished in the dirt just a few miles from here. The ranger station looked calm. Too calm. We told the woman at the desk, short, white hair, tough skin like she'd lived in the sun her whole life, that we'd lost a friend, that he'd wandered off sometime around midnight near our campsite south of the caverns. She nodded slowly. Too slowly. Do you think he came up here? She asked. I don't know, I said. We heard something. What kind of something? Now Danny hesitated. She didn't want to sound crazy. Neither of us did. But how do you say, we followed a song that knew our names to someone who files missing person reports? Just music, she said finally. He might have followed it. The ranger didn't blink, didn't smirk, just stared for a moment longer than she should have. You're not the first ones to say that, she said. That stopped both of us cold. What do you mean? I asked. She glanced behind her, made sure no one else was listening, then leaned forward on the desk. Every few years, she said, somebody hears it. Never the same story, never the same tune, but they all say the same thing. Music from the caves, from outside them, at night. I swallowed. My mouth felt too dry. And what happens? Danny asked, voice thin. The ranger tapped her finger once against a form on the counter. Sometimes they find them, usually not. Do you look? Of course. But these caves, they're massive. Some aren't even on the maps anymore. It's not like a normal park, not really. The ground's like a sponge down there, full of holes and tunnels. If someone wanted to disappear, they wouldn't have to go far. But he didn't want to disappear, I said. She met my eyes. Her own were tired. I'm not saying he did. I'm saying people hear things in the desert that aren't theirs. We filed a report. She promised to send someone out to check the area, but her tone said, don't expect much. Don't expect anything. After that, we walked the main trail into the caverns. It wasn't a whim, wasn't even hope, really. It just felt like gravity, like something pulling at the back of my mind. And I didn't want to admit that it wasn't fear that kept me moving toward that dark hole in the rock. It was curiosity. No, not curiosity, recognition. The entrance was wide and sloped, like a great mouth frozen mid-breath. Inside, the temperature dropped 20 degrees, switched on our headlamps, but the park had lights embedded in the rock. A soft, warm glow lit the path ahead, and for a while it just felt like any other cave tour. Beautiful, ancient, harmless. Stalactites hung like teeth. Stalagmites rose like frozen fingers. The silence inside wasn't like outside. It wasn't total. There were drips, echoes, breathing sounds that weren't breathing, just air moving through natural chambers. But about a quarter mile in, the lights began to flicker. Danny stopped walking. Did you see that? I nodded. One of the recessed lights buzzed like a dying fly, then popped off entirely. Darkness bled into the corner of the chamber, and in the dim, something shifted in my chest. That name song feeling again. That pressure. Let's go back, Danny said, turning. But before I could answer her, I heard it again. That same melody, distant but clear. No words, just the shape of them. And this time I wasn't sure if it was coming from ahead or behind us. We stood still, not talking, just listening. The air in the cavern suddenly felt dense, like walking underwater. My breath came slower, heavier. Every little sound, the drip of mineral water, the creak of my backpack strap, felt amplified 100 times. But that melody, that song, it stayed faint, constant, like a thread stretched just tight enough to follow, if you were stupid enough to trust it. I turned in a slow circle. My headlamp caught nothing unusual, just walls of layered limestone, scarred by centuries of mineral deposits. But that sound, it wasn't echoing off the walls like it should have. It was too smooth, too clean, no reverberation. Like it wasn't in the cave at all, but somewhere deeper. Danny looked at me, her face tight. It's not a recording, she said. That's when I knew she was afraid. Danny didn't jump to supernatural conclusions. She was the first to roll her eyes at every spooky campsite story. But now she was gripping her flashlight like a weapon, and her voice was dry. What if he's still in here? I asked quietly. We can't just wander in deeper. You heard the ranger. This place goes on for miles. I nodded, but my feet didn't move. That song was still there. No louder, no closer, but somehow more personal now. The tune bent in on itself, half melody, half memory. It reminded me of something from childhood, like a lullaby or a music box. Something my mother used to play maybe long before I even knew how to describe fear. But this wasn't comfort. This was imitation. Danny tugged my sleeve. We need to turn around. I know, I said, but I didn't. I don't remember deciding to keep going. I just started walking. The path sloped down, winding through a narrowing corridor that the tour map said led to the king's palace. I knew that part was open to visitors. I told myself if we stuck to the lit areas, we'd be fine. Just a short look, just a few more steps. Danny hesitated, then followed. Neither of us said anything else. The deeper we went, the more the air changed. It wasn't just colder, it was damp now. Close. My skin started to feel slick with moisture, and the walls sparkled faintly where the lights caught the damp mineral sheen. Every once in a while, the lights would buzz and dim as if something was draining them. I kept hearing it. The singing. Not words, still. Just tones, like vocal cords moving without language. But then, something changed. For the first time, I heard another voice layered underneath. Higher, sharper, like someone trying to match the melody but not quite getting it right. A discordant harmony. Danny must have heard it too. She stopped walking, staring at the floor. "I don't like this," she said. "This doesn't feel like a place anymore." "What do you mean?" She shook her head as if trying to explain something that only made sense inside her. "It's like the space is wrong. Like it stretches when you're not looking." She pointed her flashlight back the way we came, but the tunnel behind us looked different, narrower, and I couldn't see the glow of the entrance anymore. Just darkness, broken only by our lights. "We didn't walk that far," I whispered. "No," she said. "We didn't." Her voice broke slightly on the last word. The air felt heavier again. There was a faint static in it now. Not a sound exactly, a feeling, like standing near a power station. My ears were starting to ring, high and tight, and no amount of swallowing would fix it. "We should mark where we are," I said. Danny, always practical, nodded and reached into her pack. She pulled out a stick of chalk and drew a crude X on the rock wall at shoulder height. But as soon as she did, a sound echoed through the tunnel. Footsteps, not far, not close, just enough to make my stomach knot. "Eric," I called, instantly regretting it. The footsteps stopped. Then nothing. No answer. We stood frozen for almost a minute. Danny whispered, "Let's go back now." But I wasn't sure which way was back anymore. My brain kept flipping the directions like something was subtly shifting the walls when we blinked. The chalk mark was still there, but it looked off, higher than where she'd drawn it, tilted slightly like the wall had moved underneath it. Something dripped nearby. Not water, heavier, thicker. I turned toward the sound and swept my headlamp across the cave floor. It landed on something dark, a patch maybe 10 feet away. I stepped forward and crouched. It was a shoe, a worn, dirt-covered sneaker, Eric's. I picked it up, fingers trembling. The laces were tied, no blood, no obvious damage, just placed there, like someone had set it down as an offering. Behind me, Danny gasped. I turned quickly. Her flashlight had caught something on the wall. Not a formation, not a shadow. It looked like handprints, dozens of them, pressed into the stone, some big, some impossibly small, all stained a faint reddish brown like rust or dried clay. They trailed upward into the ceiling. Neither of us spoke. The singing stopped, just gone, cut off mid-note. And that somehow was worse than hearing it. Like whatever had been humming to us had realized it was being watched. Danny backed away first. "We have to go." I nodded. We turned, slowly retracing our steps, but the path was tighter now, the ceiling lower. I knew the cave hadn't looked like this on the way in. I could feel it reshaping itself, not physically, no tremors, no movement, but perceptually. It was turning in on itself like a dream, drawing us in deeper no matter which way we walked. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tears hit my shirt. The silence around us pressed tighter and tighter until even our footsteps felt like violations. The only sounds were the occasional drip and our breath, mine too fast, hers clipped short. Then the hum returned, but it wasn't the same. It was louder now, and closer. And it wasn't one voice. It was many. They didn't sound human. That's what made it unbearable. Dozens of overlapping voices, rising and falling like wind through broken glass. Not in unison, not in harmony, just together. Piling over each other in strange looping melodies that never resolved. Each note hovered too long or ended too early. It was wrong in a way that made your teeth ache. We ran. I don't remember choosing to. 1 second I was frozen, ears straining toward the noise, and the next I was sprinting down the narrowing path, the beam of my headlamp bouncing wildly across the slick limestone. Danny was just behind me, breathing sharp, panicked, her backpack hitting her side with every step. The tunnel twisted, not like a hallway, but like a thought you couldn't quite finish. Angles bent the wrong way. The floor sloped in dips that didn't match the elevation map I'd seen earlier that morning. Behind us, the singing continued. Always behind us, never closer, never farther, just there. Danny shouted my name once, but the echo warped it, repeated it, twisted it so that by the time it hit my ears, it sounded like 3 different people saying it at once. One scared, one angry, and one that didn't sound like her at all. We hit a fork in the path. I stopped too fast, almost slipping on the damp stone. There were no markers, no lights, just 2 black mouths in the rock, each identical. Left or right? I asked. She didn't answer. She was staring down the right path, the beam of her flashlight fixed on the floor. There was something on the ground, something soft looking. We stepped closer. A jacket. Eric's again, folded neatly, as if someone had paused there, set it down, and vanished into the stone. I touched it. Still warm, but that wasn't possible. Danny took a step back. No, she whispered. What? No more following signs. That's what it wants. I nodded. I couldn't find words. My throat was too dry, my chest too tight. The singing had stopped again, but now the silence was worse, like holding your breath underwater and not knowing when it was safe to come up. We chose the left path. It narrowed quickly, walls pulling in so close that we had to walk sideways, scraping our shoulders on jagged edges. My backpack caught once and I nearly screamed. It wasn't pain. It was the terror of getting stuck, of being held. The tunnel turned again and the stone became smoother, wet like the inside of a mouth. The air smelled different here, dank and metallic like rust and rotting wood. Every breath felt wrong, thick, saturated with something I couldn't name. I stopped walking, not because of what I saw, but because of what I heard. Breathing, right behind my left ear. I spun around, slammed my back to the wall. Danny did the same. Our lights flashed around the tunnel behind us, empty. But the breathing didn't stop. It moved, past me, along the wall. I swear I could feel it, cold, humid, like a draft from an open freezer. Danny was shaking. Her light flicked upward slowly. I followed it. There in the curve of the stone above us were holes, natural pockets in the rock like the inside of a sponge, small at first, then bigger, widening into strange, dark recesses. And in the largest of them, maybe 10 feet up, were eyes. Not glowing, not animal, just reflecting our lights. Wide, unblinking, human. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I don't think I even screamed. I just stood there, light fixed on those eyes while they stared back like they'd always been part of the stone. Then, just as slowly, they blinked. Once. And vanished. We didn't talk. We just ran. Ran through twisting paths that never stayed straight. I stopped looking for markers. I stopped hoping for signs. I just wanted out. The air started to warm again, almost imperceptibly. The tunnels opened wider. The walls moved farther apart. I told myself that meant we were getting closer to the surface, that it meant we were going the right way. That's when we saw the light. Faint, golden, flickering like a candle just around the bend. I stopped short. Danny almost slammed into me. What? I put a hand up. Shh! We crept toward it. The tunnel curved and then widened into a chamber. And there it was. A fire. Real flame in the center of the room. No smoke, no fuel, just dancing firelight on the stone. And around it, figures. 10, maybe more. Sitting, cross-legged, perfectly still. Not looking at us, not speaking. Just sitting, watching the flame. Their skin looked dry. Gray. Some wore hiking gear, others nothing at all. One of them had a park ranger's patch on their shoulder. Another was barefoot, wearing Eric's shirt. I stepped back, but my foot caught a rock and it clattered across the floor. Every head turned, all at once, not suddenly, not like a jump scare, just in unison, smooth, silent. They stared. Eyes hollow, mouths slightly open, none of them blinked. And then, from the walls, the song began again, but not a song this time. Words, soft, familiar, not in a language I knew, but in a cadence I did. Something maternal, something meant to lure. It was behind us, beside us, above us. Danny grabbed my arm. We have to move, but I couldn't. The melody twisted around my ribs like a hand. My chest tightened, my eyes blurred. I heard my name again. Not from the walls, from the fire. It wasn't loud. That's what made it terrifying. Just my name, gently spoken, right from the center of the flame. No mouth, no face. Just fire curling upward and whispering something that only I was meant to hear. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. And for a terrifying second, I wanted to answer it. I took a step forward, just one. Danny's grip tightened on my arm so hard it hurt, her fingernails digging through the fabric of my sleeve. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her hand said everything. Don't. My foot hovered over the stone floor, halfway into the ring of firelight, and I froze. The air in the room felt viscous, warm and slow like molasses. The figures around the flame didn't blink, didn't breathe, but the way they sat, it was as if they were waiting for something to return. Not praying, anticipating. Then one of them moved. Just the head, twitching toward the flame, then up at me. Eyes glassy and dry, as if they hadn't closed in days. The mouth opened slightly and a sound came out. Not speech, static, high, thin, like radio feedback in a storm. It drilled into my ears like it was looking for a home in my skull. Danny yanked me backward, and that somehow snapped the spell. The room rippled, the flame sputtered, then surged with a sudden hiss. Every figure around it stood up at once. Not fast, not aggressive, just wrong. Like they didn't remember how legs were supposed to work. One took a step toward us, then another. The static rose with every movement. No footsteps, just that sound, eating the space between us. We turned and ran. The passage behind us had changed again. The floor was wet now, slick with some kind of mineral sheen that made it hard to find footing. The air was thick with that sound. It wasn't coming from behind us anymore. It was everywhere, in the walls, in the ceiling, in our bones. We didn't talk. There wasn't time. All I could do was keep moving forward, deeper into the maze, even though every instinct screamed, wrong way, wrong way. My thoughts didn't feel like mine anymore. They moved in circles, like the cave was eroding something inside me. Danny suddenly stopped ahead of me, one arm stretched out to block me. "What?" I hissed. "Listen." I did. The static had faded, and now there was something else. Breathing, not ours. Heavy, slow, wet. From up ahead. We switched off our lights. I don't know why. Just reflex. Some primal fear from a part of the brain older than language. We pressed ourselves against the wall, swallowed by blackness, and waited. Something came around the bend. I didn't see it. I couldn't. But I felt it. Heat. Damp. The way the air pulled away from it as it passed, like the cave itself was shrinking back. Its breath scraped the stone, a sound like lungs that hadn't worked right in years. It stopped just feet from us. I heard a sound like wet cloth dragging along rock. A scrape. It stood there, listening, sniffing the air. I held my breath until my lungs screamed, until black dots filled my vision. Beside me, Danny didn't move a muscle. Then it left. It didn't walk. It just receded, the way a nightmare does when you wake up, slow and reluctant. When it was finally gone, we didn't speak. We didn't turn on the lights. We just felt our way forward, fingers brushing rock, stepping quietly. And that's when we saw it. Light, not flame, not golden. Sunlight. Faint, fractured beams pouring from a split in the cave ceiling above, a natural skylight. High, maybe 30 feet, but real. And under it, a rusted ladder bolted into the rock. We ran. I didn't care if it held. I didn't care if it went anywhere at all. It was a way out. Danny climbed first, and I followed. Every rung groaned, threatening to tear loose, but we didn't stop. Not once. Behind us, that song returned, lower this time. Deeper. And now, it sounded angry, like it had waited too long. We burst into the light, out onto a ledge of rock and dry grass, far above the trail system. No signs, no markers, just heat and open sky and the disorienting realization that we were hours from where we started. We collapsed in the sun, gasping. The desert spread out below us, vast, silent, no fire, no music, no Eric. I looked at Danny. She didn't cry, she just stared at the horizon, her face blank. I wanted to believe we were safe. But as I turned to look back toward the cave opening behind us, I saw something. Just for a second, a face pressed into the darkness. Not angry, not sad, just watching. We didn't talk about what we saw that day. Not to each other, not to the Rangers, not even to Eric's family. We gave them the version that made sense, the kind the world allows. He wandered off. We tried to find him. We got lost. The caves are dangerous. We were lucky to get out. That's all they needed. That's all they could handle. You can't file a report for something that sings your name out of stone. They searched, of course. Drones, dogs, rangers on foot. Nothing. No tracks, no gear, no signs of struggle. Just gone. Folded into the landscape like he'd never been real. Danny left a few days later, flew back east, said she needed to be near people, cities, crowds. She didn't hug me goodbye. I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could make sense of it if I just stayed near the silence long enough. Maybe part of me believed Eric was still close, like the desert had borrowed him, not taken him. Or maybe I was just afraid to go home. Afraid the silence would follow me there. For days, I parked the RV at a dusty roadside lot near the cavern's entrance. I didn't explore, didn't go back into the caves. I just sat and listened. At night, I left the windows open. The wind carried little things with it. Not voices, not really, but textures, patterns. Sometimes I thought I heard humming in the distance, barely a frequency, a vibration inside the bones. One night, I made the mistake of recording it. I thought maybe I could prove something, capture it, show someone. I set my phone on the windowsill and let it run while I tried to sleep. When I played it back the next morning, it was almost all silence. But about 45 minutes in, I heard something, faint, far away, someone singing. One verse, just one. And then, my name. Clear. Like someone leaned in inches from the microphone and whispered it through their teeth. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. By the end of the week, I knew I had to leave. I couldn't survive like that, hovering between one world and another, waiting for something I didn't understand to call me back. So I left the RV behind, took a bus out of New Mexico, and kept moving until the desert felt like a memory. I deleted the recording, erased it with a kind of reverence, like I was burning something I wasn't meant to keep. But it didn't leave me, because the sound, it never really stops. It just hides in the quiet. It's in the white noise of a hotel air conditioner, in the distant hum of street traffic late at night, in the pauses between thoughts when your brain goes still and starts to drift. That's when I hear it, that melody, changing, moving, waiting. Sometimes I wonder if Danny hears it too. We haven't spoken since, but I like to believe we're both lying awake in separate parts of the country, hearing the same low tune drifting in from nowhere. I wonder if it ever calls her by name. I started writing all this down because I had to put it somewhere, not to convince anyone, not to warn them, just to get it out of my head. But now that I'm finishing it, now that the words are here on the screen, I realize something. The song stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I should be relieved. But I'm not, because silence means it's listening. I moved to Oregon after that. Small town, quiet, green in a way that New Mexico never was. Rain almost every day, like the sky was constantly apologizing for something. I found a job at a hardware store, rented a 1-bedroom above a used bookstore, and told myself I was starting over. I never told anyone about Carlsbad. I never said Eric's name out loud again. But something changed in me. Not just fear, not just trauma, something deeper. Like the edges of my reality had frayed, and no matter how far I got from the cave, the thread still pulled. Sometimes I'd catch myself humming. Not anything recognizable. Just low, strange melodies drawn out in breath between tasks. I didn't even realize I was doing it half the time until a customer would look at me sideways or my coworker would ask, "What's that song?" And I'd freeze. Mouth dry. Mouth dry. No memory of the tune. I started leaving the radio on at night. Not music, just talk shows, static, anything with voices. I couldn't stand the silence anymore. Not because I feared the sound, because I feared what it might cover. And then one night I got a letter, no return address, postmarked El Paso. Inside was a single sheet of paper, 3 words typed in the center. You heard it. That was it. No name, no signature. But I knew who it was from. Danny. I sat with that letter in my lap for hours, barely breathing. My hands went cold. My stomach felt hollow. There was no threat in it, no warning, just confirmation. A whisper between survivors. She heard it too, and she still hears it. After that, it got worse. Not louder, just closer. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain someone had just stepped out of my bedroom closet. No sound, no shape, just the aftertaste of presence, like warm breath on cold skin. The hallway light would flicker. The windows would fog from the inside. The song never came back full, but fragments did. A chord in the hum of a refrigerator, a phrase in the rhythm of a passing train, a vibration in the water pipes. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even that didn't help, because what haunted me wasn't the dark, it was where the sound was coming from. Not outside, not behind walls, but inside my own hearing. It was in me now. Whatever it was, whatever lived in that cave or sang through it, it didn't follow me like a ghost. It stitched itself into the part of me that listens. And one night, I finally heard Eric's voice. I was half asleep, lying on the couch with a blanket over my legs and a podcast playing through cheap laptop speakers. The host was talking about some lost expedition, something historical, factual, and then mid-sentence, the audio glitched. It didn't stop, didn't cut, it just shifted. His voice morphed, slowly at first, word by word, into Eric's. The cadence, the tone, that goofy lilt he had when he was trying to sound serious, and then clear as day, "You never left, you know." I jumped up so fast the laptop crashed to the floor. The screen shattered. Sparks, the speakers went dead. Dead silence. But in the space after, I could still hear him. Not through my ears, through my bones, like memory made physical. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the bathroom with the shower running, door locked, lights on, just trying to feel present. Solid. Real. But everything felt wrong. My own reflection didn't match. My face looked slightly off, like a familiar person I hadn't seen in years. The next day I took a knife and cut the speakers out of every device I owned. Laptop, phone, TV. It didn't help, because it wasn't the tech, it was me. It took me months to understand what had happened. Eric didn't just go into the cave, he was taken. And whatever sang him in, it doesn't stop at one voice. It learns, it adapts, it waits. Now it's learning mine. Sometimes I wake up with songs in my head I've never heard before. Strange, coiling melodies, and when I try to hum them out loud, people flinch. One woman started crying in the checkout line at the store. I asked what was wrong. She said, "That song. My brother used to sing that. He died when I was 12. I didn't say anything. Just stepped back, heart hammering. I didn't know her. I didn't know the song. But it did, and it was using me to find her. That's the worst part. It doesn't just it remembers. It carries people like echoes in its chest, and it plays them when it wants to be let back in. And I'm becoming a speaker, a vessel. Every night it grows louder in me. And now I can't tell which voice is mine. I don't remember falling asleep last night, but I woke up humming, low, barely audible. I was standing in the kitchen, stove on, a pan heating with nothing in it, my hand on the knob like I just turned the burner up. No memory of walking there, no memory of the tune, just the taste of it on my tongue like smoke and salt and wet stone. And I was smiling. That's what made me sit down. Right there on the cold tile floor. Not fear, not confusion, but the smile, because it wasn't mine. I hadn't felt joy, real joy in months. Not since Carlsbad. Everything since had been survival, static between the cracks of normalcy. A life held together by habit and low-grade dread. And yet there I was, humming and smiling like something inside me was trying to take the wheel. I stayed on the floor for over an hour, still, breathing shallow, waiting for whatever was underneath my skin to pull back. Eventually, it did, but not all the way. I've started hearing voices outside my apartment now. Late, between midnight and 3 a.m., not neighbors, not the drunk kid from downstairs, not footsteps. Voices, humming at first, then words, then silence, sharp, expectant. Twice I've walked to the peephole and seen no one, but I hear them shift, just past the door frame, like they're leaning against the other side, cheek to wood, ear to the keyhole, listening. Last night I almost opened it, just to see, but I didn't. I stood there for 20 minutes, hand on the lock, heart racing, skin hot. I think I said something aloud. I think I asked who was there. And I think I answered. That's the part I can't explain. There was a voice, my voice, on the other side, and it said, soft as sleep, come back, you left something behind. When I woke up this morning, I found dirt under my nails, fine dry dust, the kind you only get from desert stone. My shoes were near the door, unlaced, soles crusted with what looked like salt. I haven't left town in weeks, but my body, some part of it is still going back, over and over, like sleepwalking into memory. And now, even during the day, I can feel it waiting, a pressure behind the noise of life, in the low hum of traffic, the way lights flicker right before you flip the switch, the blank spots in conversations where people forget what they were saying mid-sentence and never realize why. It's opening. Something is, and I think it's using me as the door. The last time I dreamt, if that's what it was, I saw Eric. He was sitting in a cavern, not scared, not sad, just still. His eyes were closed like he was listening to something far away, and the flame in front of him wasn't fire anymore. It was light shaped like a face, no features, just suggestion. And it turned when I entered. It saw me, and it smiled with my smile. Then Eric opened his eyes and said, "You brought it with you." When I woke up, my ears were ringing so hard I couldn't stand. The hum was inside my skull, wrapped around the shape of my hearing. For hours afterward, I couldn't tell if any sound was real. Every voice on the radio felt like someone I used to know. I called Danny. First time since we split. She answered on the first ring. Didn't say hello, just breathed into the line like she'd been waiting. "I think it's happening again," I said. Her voice was dry, broken. It never stopped. Silence. Then, "Have you heard your name?" I didn't answer. Because I had. Not once, not twice. Every day now. In crowds, in reflections, in music that doesn't exist outside my head. Sometimes it comes from inside cupboards. Sometimes from static when I change the channel. Sometimes from my own mouth while I'm brushing my teeth and not looking in the mirror. She whispered something before she hung up, so soft I almost missed it. "Don't go back, no matter what it offers." But I think I already have, not physically. Not yet. But piece by piece, each song, each hum, each time I hear someone call my name in turn, knowing there's no one there, something goes with it. Some part of me, and what's left, I don't think it belongs to me anymore. The song is louder now. I don't need to hear it through walls or wires. It's in me. It is me. And it's learning how to sing in your voice too. Today, I stood in the mirror and watched myself speak without moving my mouth. I don't mean that as a metaphor. I don't mean I felt distant or disconnected or tired. I mean my reflection whispered to me. While I stood still, I'd been brushing my teeth, normal morning, pale sky outside the bathroom window, the quiet hum of traffic below. I was humming again, something I didn't recognize, something that felt old, hollow, melancholy, the kind of song you hum without knowing it has a beginning. Then I looked up. My reflection wasn't brushing its teeth, it was staring at me, and then its lips moved, slow, deliberate. "You remember the wrong way," it said. Then it smiled. My smile, but wider. Too wide. I dropped the toothbrush, stepped back so fast I hit the wall. And just like that, it was me again, blank-faced, breathless, holding the brush. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared, waiting to see if it would do it again. It didn't, but I knew it would eventually. It's been building towards something, not just inside me, through me. I think I know now why Eric walked into that cave. I think I know why Danny ran as far as she could, why I never really came home. Because it wants you to understand it, bit by bit. Like a song you hear in pieces, until one day you hum the whole thing and realize it's been playing under everything the entire time. And once you know it, you can't unknow it. You carry it. You become the speaker. I stopped working 2 days ago. Can't focus. My thoughts blur around the edges. Sometimes I'll read a word on a sign, parking or closed, and it'll look wrong, like a translation. I blink and it's back. But for that split second, I feel like I'm standing somewhere else. Underground, cold, listening. The humming's constant now. It's not just in the air. It's in the bones of buildings, in power lines, in water. I can hear it through the plumbing in the walls, feel it under my feet in the subway. It's calling people. I know it is. And they don't even realize it. You've seen them, haven't you? People standing still in crowds, faces tilted, mouths open like they forgot what they were about to say, or someone humming with headphones in, but there's no music, or the ones who walk into the woods and don't come back. The caves aren't the only doors. They're just the ones shaped like mouths. But this song, it finds other ways in. Last night I dreamed I was under the earth, not lost, not scared, just there. A tunnel stretched out in front of me, and along the walls were carvings, faces, dozens, hundreds, all shapes, all ages, etched into the rock like fossilized memories. I walked past them slowly like I was being shown something, and each one had my eyes. I woke up with dirt in my mouth, real dirt, dry, bitter, and a sound in my ears like breath moving through hollow stone. I haven't left the apartment since. I can't. I'm afraid of who I'll be when I go out there. I look in the mirror and see something waiting behind my face. Not hiding, not haunting, just patient. Like it knows I'll stop fighting soon, like it's already won. I can still type, still speak, still pretend, but every sentence feels like a lie I'm telling over the truth. Because here's what I've realized. The song never wanted to scare me. It wanted me to hear it, to carry it. And now I do. I hear it in everything. In the way the refrigerator kicks on, in the echo of my footfalls, in the space between thunder and the sound of rain. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear Eric again. Not calling for help, not asking me to save him. Just singing, softly, like he's trying to remember something he forgot before he was born. And his voice, it's starting to sound like mine. I don't think this is possession. It's not like something climbed inside me and started pulling strings. It's quieter than that. More gradual, like erosion. One tiny piece at a time, wearing away what used to be me until the space fills with something else. I still know who I am. I remember my name, my past, my family. I can still navigate the world on the surface. But underneath, there's movement, like water beneath ice. A current pulling in a direction I didn't choose. I used to think the desert was empty. That's what people always say, right? That it's silent, barren. But it's not. It listens, it echoes. It repeats things back to you, not exactly how you said them, but how you meant them. It reflects pieces of your own mind until you can't tell what came from inside and what's coming from the air around you. That's what Carlsbad was, a mirror. And I think what I saw in the dark down there was the version of myself I've been carrying my whole life, quiet, cold, unfinished, a note that never resolved. And the caves, the song, the whispers, they didn't make it up. They heard it. They amplified it. That's all that finds the quiet in you and sings into it until the quiet sings back. And once that starts, you don't want silence anymore. You need the hum. It becomes your comfort, your rhythm. You start building your days around it. Your emotions flatten, not numb, just tuned, aligned to something deeper. There's a power in it. That's the dangerous part. It doesn't hurt you. It seduces you. Even now, I can feel it smoothing out the corners of my anxiety, calming the noise in my head. My body's tense, but my mind is clear. I've stopped having nightmares, not because the fear is gone, but because the fear is satisfied. It's been answered. Eric's voice is with me all the time now. Not loud, not intrusive, just present. Like the memory of someone who used to sit next to you every day. Sometimes I think he's trying to warn me. Other times it feels like he's guiding me. But most often, he just sings. One verse, over and over, the same 4 notes, descending. I've looked them up, tried to write them down, but no matter how I notate it, it changes. It refuses capture, like it's alive. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep writing this. Not because I'm scared, because I'm changing. Language feels more distant every day. Thoughts too. They come slower now, like they're being translated from a language I no longer speak natively. There's something deeper I feel, but can't express. I catch myself standing still for long periods, hours sometimes, breathing slow, listening, just listening. And I don't know what for, but when I do it, I feel closer. Closer to something I can't name. The song wants to return to itself. That's the sense I get. Like all of us who've heard it, really heard it, are just fragments, carriers, mouths. It doesn't want to hurt us. It wants to reunite, to become whole again. And it will, through us. If I went back to Carlsbad now, I think I'd find the entrance open again. Even if the rangers say it's sealed, even if maps say it's closed, I'd find a way in, because I know now the cave was never underground. Not entirely, it's under you, under your thoughts, under the surface of the world. Every silence you've ever heard, that was it breathing. And if you listen long enough, it'll start to breathe in rhythm with you. You won't notice the change at first. Just little things. A new melody in your head when you wake. An ache in your jaw like you've been singing in your sleep. A voice calling your name, not from the outside, but inside the name itself. And when that happens, you'll understand why Eric didn't come back. You'll understand why I stayed, why Danny ran, why I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not writing this to warn you. It's too late for that. I'm writing it so you'll know the words when you hear them, so you'll remember the melody when the wind brings it to your door, because the song is moving now. It's not just in Carlsbad, it's in the cities, the wires, the quiet. It's found its way into the hum of machines, into the pause between your breath and your heartbeat. It's already here, and if you're reading this, it's listening to you. Right now, can you hear it? It's humming your name. You ever ignore a sound long enough that it becomes part of the silence? It started like that, a soft, scratching noise, barely noticeable at first, something you chalk up to dust settling, a breeze rattling gravel, the desert stretching its skin at night. We just parked in Monument Valley, set up by a rock formation that looked like a pair of jagged red fingers reaching up toward a sky too big for comfort. You don't realize how wide the world is until you park an RV in the middle of all that nothing. But that's the thrill of it, right? That's what people crave when they come out west. Solitude, space, silence. My name's Evan. I'm 38. My wife, Jess, is 36. We've been full-timers for 3 years now, chasing warmth and the country in our converted Class C. We're not influencers. We're not living some fantasy. We're just people who got tired of small talk and HOA meetings and mortgage stress. We wanted to wake up with red dirt under our nails and the sound of coyotes miles off in the distance. We wanted to breathe, but breathing got harder out there. We rolled into Monument Valley after a long drive from Moab, looking for something raw. Jess had this old Navajo travel guide she picked up at a thrift shop, half the pages torn, but it pointed us to a stretch of BLM land about 4 miles from the main overlook, near the Arizona-Utah line. It wasn't part of the main park. No lights, no tourists, no rangers, just us, our rig, and the stillness. We set up late, just as the sun dipped low behind those monolithic butts. That light, golden and stretching like it was trying to hold on to the earth a little longer, made everything feel sacred. Even the wind seemed respectful. It whispered, but never screamed. We had dinner outside that first night. Pulled pork over the fire, some whiskey to burn off the chill. Jess kept staring out at the horizon, eyes glassy, like she was looking for something just beyond what she could name. Feels like a place where stories don't end, she said. I didn't know what she meant at the time. I laughed and said something dumb like, "You getting poetic on me?" She smiled, but her eyes never left the dusk. The first time I heard the scratching, I thought it was the fire cracking, or maybe the wind dragging something against the undercarriage. It was faint, a subtle series of taps and drags like claws on metal, soft enough that I almost didn't register it. I didn't mention it to Jess. Next morning, we hiked out toward a rock wall that looked like a leaning spine. No trails, just footprints and dry washes, the kind of terrain that makes your boots feel heavy with meaning. We passed through a narrow gulch that reeked of sage and something else. Old water, maybe. Or rot. It didn't sit right, whatever it was, but we didn't say anything about it. That's something you learn quick out here. The desert doesn't care how you feel. We got back around sunset, dusted, sunburnt, and buzzing with that high you get from being just a little lost and making it back on your own. The rig looked untouched, exactly where we left it. We made camp again, ate, talked about nothing, slept. The scratching came again that night, louder. This time, it woke me up. At first, I thought maybe something was brushing against the outside wall. You hear about desert mice, maybe a coyote sniffing around, but this sounded too deliberate, like something was underneath us. Not skittering, dragging, a slow, rough movement. Nails on aluminum. I held my breath, trying to listen harder, like my ears could reach down into the darkness below. Jess stirred beside me. "You hear that?" I hesitated. "Yeah, probably just an animal." She sat up. "There's no food down there. Why would it stay?" We listened. Nothing. I got up, flicked on the outside floodlight, opened the door, and stepped barefoot into the dirt. It was cold, still, no movement. I ducked under the RV with a flashlight. Nothing. No prints, no drag marks, no signs of burrowing, just red dust and the faint odor of grease from the generator. Still, I didn't sleep much after that, and the next morning I noticed something weird. Our leveling blocks were shifted. Not a lot, maybe an inch, but enough to make the RV tilt a bit toward the driver's side. I hadn't noticed it before, and I always double-check the level when we park. It's habit. I chalked it up to settling ground. I told myself that. Again and again. That afternoon, we stayed closer to camp. Something about the silence out there started to feel too complete, like we were being muffled. Every now and then, a raven would circle overhead and then vanish behind a butte, as if it had somewhere more important to be. The wind didn't hum anymore. It scraped. Jess was quieter too. She walked out to a rock ledge and sat there for hours, watching the open desert. When she came back, her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but didn't speak. That night, the scratching was louder, longer. It started right after midnight, not like something that just happened to be passing through, but like something waiting for the dark to fall. It circled. From under the rig, we heard it move in a slow, deliberate path, front to back, then side to side. Not scurrying, not confused, measured. I swear to God, it was listening, timing us. It would stop whenever we moved, then resume when we were still. I wanted to go out there, get under the RV and look, but my body wouldn't move. I told myself I was being smart, that I didn't want to scare it off before I could identify it. But the truth is, I was afraid, and not of what it might be, of what it might not be. You can convince yourself of anything if you really need to sleep. So I repeated all the things that make people feel safe. It's probably a badger, just desert animals, the wind, the ground settling. Hell, maybe a branch stuck under there, moving in the breeze. The mind reaches for whatever makes the world logical again. But logic didn't explain the smell. It was faint at first. On the third night, just as the scratching started, I smelled something under the vents, like copper, like wet pennies, and something dead. It came in waves, and every time the sound intensified, so did the stink. Jess smelled it too. She didn't say anything, but she turned away from the air vent and pulled her sleeping bag over her nose. That was the first night we locked the RV from the inside. We never lock it when boondocking. There's no one around. But something about that smell made my fingers twitch toward the deadbolt, made me want layers between us and the night. And that was the night Jess whispered just before drifting off, "What if it's not an animal?" Her voice barely carried in the darkness, but it hit me like a hammer to the spine. What if it's not an animal? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the moment she said it, I realized I'd already been thinking the same thing. Not in words, not directly, but in that gnawing place inside me where instincts live, where things don't have to make sense to be feared. That night, I kept waking up, eyes flicking toward the vents, ears straining toward the undercarriage. The scratching never stopped. It would pause, shift, then continue, as though it had all night to do whatever it was doing. At one point, I got out of bed, moved silently across the vinyl flooring, and crouched near the vent beneath the sink. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to get out. I leaned close, real close, until my forehead nearly touched the cabinet. Nothing, no sound, but the second I stood up, it scratched again, like it knew. Morning finally came, and the desert light was blinding. You'd think sunrise would feel like relief after a night like that, but it didn't. The red sandstone glowed like flesh. The rocks all around us had shapes I hadn't noticed before. Faces, backs, bent knees. There was a crouching quality to them, like they were all leaning in. Jess was already outside when I stepped down from the RV. She hadn't touched her coffee, just sat on a camp chair, arms tucked into her hoodie, staring at the dirt under the rig. I followed her gaze. Still nothing. But then I saw it, a small patch of disturbed dust directly beneath the rear axle, like something had brushed or rubbed against it in long strokes. No paw prints, no claw marks, just a strange, wide smudge like pressure without weight. "I didn't sleep," she muttered. I squatted beside her. "We should move. Find a real campground. Somewhere with people." She turned toward me, and I saw it in her eyes, that thing we never say aloud when we're out in the wild. That awful possibility. What if people make it worse? "You don't think we'll find help, do you?" she asked. I didn't answer. Just stood up and went back inside. We didn't leave. I don't know why. We packed up like we were going to, but something held us there. That invisible rope, the one that wraps around your chest when you try to walk away from something that hasn't finished with you yet. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't even denial. It was some deep-rooted part of us that had to understand. Curiosity, maybe, or obsession. By noon, the wind started to shift. A low, hot breeze rolled through the valley and brought with it something new. The smell of rain, even though the sky was empty. That same coppery scent seeped into everything. Not strong enough to gag on, but enough to coat your throat. Jess stayed inside that afternoon, said she had a headache. I sat outside alone, watching the horizon until my eyes ached. The stillness was unbearable. You think you crave peace and quiet until you find the kind of silence that doesn't make room for you, the kind that watches. Around 4, I decided to crawl under the RV, for real this time. No flashlight scan from a distance. I wanted to see. I got down flat on my belly, the ground warm and dusty beneath me. I slid forward inch by inch toward the center of the undercarriage. Nothing, just the chassis, the holding tanks, wires, pipes. Then I saw it. A small piece of fabric, caught on one of the pipes near the rear axle. It wasn't ours. Too torn, too old, Dusty, reddish brown, looked like burlap or woven cloth. My breath caught. I reached forward, grabbed it, and that's when I heard it. From just inches away, a soft sigh, not a mechanical release, not the wind, a human sound, wet, shuddering, like breath drawn in through rotted teeth. I scrambled backwards, smashing my elbow on the leveling jack, dragging my shirt through the dust. I hit the sunlight and stood up so fast I nearly blacked out. Jess ran out of the RV. What happened? I couldn't speak for a moment. Just held up the cloth, shaking. She stared at it, her lips parted, and then she said something I'll never forget. I saw someone last night. The words dropped like lead. I just stared at her. What do you mean you saw someone? She hesitated. I didn't want to say anything. I thought I was dreaming. But around 3 in the morning, I looked out the window and I saw a shape, just sitting under the RV, crouched, not moving. I blinked and it was gone. Why didn't you wake me? Because I didn't want it to see me move. We stood there in the late afternoon heat, holding that scrap of cloth like it might burst into flame. The wind kicked up harder now. Grit swirled in our eyes and teeth. We said nothing more. That night, we didn't cook, didn't sit outside. We shut every blind, locked every door, slept in our clothes with the windows cracked just enough for airflow. I held a crowbar in one hand under the sheets. Jess kept the flashlight on. We didn't speak. We just listened, and the scratching came earlier. It started around 10:15, a slow, deliberate series of scrapes, then silence, then a knock, just once, right under our bed, like knuckles on the metal floor. Jess sat up and grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Her nails dug in. Another knock. Then the smell hit again, stronger. Wet copper and rot, like something bleeding in the heat. Then voices, whispers, I swear on my life, coming from the floor vents. They weren't words I could understand. Not English. Not Navajo either. I'd spent enough time in the Southwest to recognize that. It was guttural, broken, rhythmic, like a prayer being spit out by someone drowning. I got up, nearly falling over, and dropped to my knees beside the vent. I pressed my ear to the plastic grill. Silence. But then, a low hum, vibrating through the metal, almost like it was coming from inside the frame of the RV. I yanked back, slammed the vent shut, and looked at Jess. We're leaving. First light. I don't care where we go. She nodded. Her eyes were wide and glassy, like a deer staring down headlights. We sat there, backs to the walls, crowbar and flashlight in hand, waiting for the sun to rise. The sun never felt slower. I watched the first pale light creep along the seams of the blinds like it had to fight to get in. When it finally poured through the cracks, I almost sobbed. Jess didn't move, but I saw the tension in her shoulders ease just a fraction. Neither of us had slept. The silence outside felt just as heavy as the night, like the world was holding its breath. We packed like soldiers retreating under fire. No breakfast, no coffee. I didn't even disconnect the leveling blocks properly, just tossed them into the rear storage bay and slammed it shut. Jess stayed inside, eyes locked on the rearview monitor like she expected something to crawl into frame. When I turned the ignition and heard the engine catch, I wanted to cry with relief. But when I shifted into drive, the RV wouldn't move. The tires spun like we were caught on something, but we weren't in mud, we weren't in sand. We were on flat, packed earth, the same spot we'd parked on days ago. I gunned it again. Nothing. The rear wheels lifted slightly like we were caught on a low barrier. Jess ran to the back and opened the rear door. She screamed. I was out of the driver's seat in a flash, sprinting around to her side. She stood there, mouth open, one hand over her nose, pointing beneath the bumper. It wasn't just the smell, though it hit like something feral, metallic and rotten, thick as tar. It was what had been built under us. A ring, made of small stones, bleached white, arranged carefully in a circle beneath the center of our RV. No tracks, no drag marks, no footprints, just that perfect circle of bone-colored rock with a spiral carved into the dirt in its center. And right beneath our differential, scratched into the red earth, was a symbol. Something jagged, twisted. I recognized it, because I'd seen it on the piece of cloth I found the day before. We didn't speak. I kicked apart the circle with my boot, scattering the rocks as hard as I could, ignoring the way my skin crawled with every motion. When it was broken, I got back in the cab and gunned the engine again. The RV moved. We didn't stop to check anything, didn't look back, just drove, bouncing over dirt ruts and dry washes, dust billowing behind us like smoke. We didn't speak until we hit the paved road, and even then it took 20 minutes before Jess finally exhaled. We drove for hours, past Kayenta, through Tuba City, toward Flagstaff. Only when we reached the edge of town did I notice something was off with the rig. It pulled slightly to the left, even on flat road. I chalked it up to the rough exit from Monument Valley. Maybe I'd bent something. We checked into an RV park just south of town. One of those places with full hookups and satellite dishes on every roof, and it felt like heaven. The noise of neighbors, kids playing on bikes, propane smells, real human life. But when we stopped, that smell followed us. Jess was the first to say it. It's still here. And she was right. It was faint, almost like it was seeping from the vents. That same coppery rot, dulled by motion, now settling in the stillness. I opened every cabinet, every hatch, checked for dead animals, mold, rotting food. Nothing. I crawled under the rig again, this time in the safety of daylight and neighbors only feet away. That's when I saw the handprint, pressed into the dust-caked oil pan. Small, thin-fingered, clawed. It wasn't made by a tool or a glove. You could see the fingerprint ridges in the grit. I called a mechanic, told him we'd hit something in the desert and wanted a full undercarriage inspection. He came the next day, took one look at the symbol I'd scrawled into the side of the paper, and visibly paled. "You picked up something you shouldn't have," he muttered. I thought he meant literal debris. But then he said, "I've seen that mark before." I leaned in. "Where?" He hesitated, looked around the RV park like he didn't want to be overheard. "Back when I was a kid, my uncle worked cleanup out near Tsegi Canyon. Found a camper turned over in a wash. No people, no blood, just those symbols, carved into the undercarriage, marked in ash. Everything inside the trailer was untouched, but the dust inside had been disturbed, like someone had crawled through every inch of it." I stared at him, chilled. He wouldn't take our money. "Cleanse your rig," he said. "I'm not touching it." So we tried. We went to a local shop that sold sage and cedar bundles. The woman behind the counter took one look at us and said, "You've been somewhere the wind doesn't go." We burned sage, we prayed, though neither of us is religious. We drove east, away from the red rocks, through forest, through rain, through cities, but it followed us. The scratching didn't stop, it got smarter. Now it came during the day, soft enough to be dismissed, but always from inside the frame. I tore up the floor panels, checked the ducts. Nothing. We kept moving. Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, no peace. One night in Arkansas, I finally snapped. I yanked the access panel off the back compartment where the inverter sat and found claw marks inside the wood paneling, as if something had been scratching from within. That night, Jess had a dream. She told me the next morning in a whisper, over instant coffee she didn't touch. "There was a man under the RV," she said, "but he didn't have eyes, just black pits. He whispered, but it wasn't in words. It was like he was remembering us. And he said we broke the circle." Her voice cracked. "Evan, he said the circle was holding him in, not out." I didn't know what to say. What could I say? That we should go back and fix it? We couldn't. We left something behind, and in doing so, we let something else out. I still remember the exact moment I understood we'd never outrun it. We were in Tennessee. A small wooded RV park near the Smokies, far from the deserts, far from the red dust, far from that circle of bone-white stone. It'd been weeks since Monument Valley, and we'd started lying to ourselves, saying things like, maybe it was a one-time thing, maybe it's gone now, maybe it wasn't real. That night, we grilled burgers, sat by a real fire pit, talked about maybe settling down. We laughed, actual laughter, the first in a long time. I remember Jess looking up at the trees and saying, "It's so green here," like we escaped the dream. We went to bed early, slept with the windows cracked, and around 2:30 in the morning, the RV moved. Not a sway, not a tremble. It shifted, lifted slightly on the left side, and then settled back down. Jess jolted awake. "Did you feel that?" I was already climbing out of bed, crowbar in hand. I flung open the door, jumped barefoot onto the grass, and dropped to the ground. And there it was again. A mark in the dirt beneath the RV, a single handprint, pressed deep into the soil like someone had pushed up from underneath, lifting the weight of the rig by that one point. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Neither did Jess. We sat on opposite sides of the RV, guarding vents like soldiers in a trench. The scratching didn't come that night, but the silence was worse. In the morning, I opened every compartment again, every access panel, every square inch of undercarriage. Nothing, except the smell. It came back stronger than ever. I don't even think I can describe it anymore. It's beyond rot, beyond copper. It's like grief and rust and something forgotten in a crypt. And it never entirely leaves now. It hides under the bed, in the vents, in the walls, like it's in the very breath of the rig. We stopped traveling after that. Found a small RV park in Georgia and paid for a month at a time. Concrete pads, electric hookups, community center, the kind of place old-timers winter in. It was quiet, normal. We figured maybe if we stopped moving, it would stop following. But staying still made it worse. We heard it every night. Saw shadows near the jacks. Once, a neighbor knocked on our door and asked if we were having raccoon problems. He'd heard something moving under our rig. We laughed, said, "Yeah, probably." But when he walked away, we both stood in silence, shaking. Then Jess started sleepwalking. I found her one night with her hands pressed to the floor vent under the dinette, whispering. She didn't respond when I said her name, just stared straight ahead, whispering something over and over. I couldn't understand it. When I finally touched her shoulder, she jerked like she'd been electrocuted, gasped, looked at me like I was a stranger. She didn't remember any of it. We tried therapy. Not the typical kind, the kind you find in corners of the internet, on dusty forums for people who've seen things they can't explain. People who talk in code, who say things like, "You let it in," or "The land remembers." We contacted a man in Flagstaff, a retired anthropologist who'd studied Navajo and Hopi ritual sites for decades. I emailed him the symbol, told him I'd found it under our RV, left out the weirder stuff, just said I was curious. He wrote back the same day, said it was not a symbol to be played with, that it had no clear meaning in any published records, but he'd seen it once, in a private collection of photographs taken at a canyon cave site that was later sealed off by the Bureau of Land Management. The symbol had been etched into the floor beneath what he described as human remains found in an impossible position. He said it might be tied to stories of something called a Kechidi, a being that lives in the spaces beneath, feeding on movement, memory, and transgression. A thin thing, he called it. Something that slips through layers, waits in silence, and mimics the sound of life until it can replace it. He asked me one last question in the email. "Have you heard it whisper your name yet?" I slammed the laptop shut. I didn't tell Jess, but that night, it did. Right as we were falling asleep, I heard it through the wall. Not from outside, not from under, from inside. A breath, close. And then Evan, drawn out like it was tasting the sound. I froze. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. And then from the kitchen, Evan, the same voice, like it was trying to decide where I was. I got up, crowbar in hand, moved slow, turned on every light. The RV was empty, but the air, it vibrated like sound had sunk into the walls and stayed there, hiding. I found Jess sitting in the shower, shaking, clutching her knees to her chest. She said nothing. We left again the next morning. But the truth is, we're not escaping. We're just moving. Constantly. From campground to campground, trying to stay ahead of something that doesn't have a name. A thing that doesn't care about distance or daylight. That doesn't leave claw marks anymore because it doesn't need to. Now it leaves pieces of us behind. Worn things, familiar smells, bits of memory that feel, off. Sometimes I wake up and something's missing. A photo, a receipt, a shirt I swore I packed. Sometimes I hear Jess crying in the middle of the night. But when I turn over, she's asleep. Sometimes I hear myself breathing when I'm not. The hardest part to explain to anyone, if I ever could explain any of this, is that it's not just about fear anymore. It's erosion. It's slow disassembly. The life we had, the routines we trusted, the small comforts of being grounded in reality, they're all being unthreaded, like someone's pulling at our seams while we sleep. It's not loud. It's patient. And it knows we know. We're in North Carolina now, camped in a thick grove of pines near the coast. Nothing but tree frogs, wet heat, and cicadas so loud they almost drown out the whispering when it starts. Almost. But even here, I still wake up every night around the same time, 2:33 a.m. without fail. Not from a sound, not from a nightmare, from a feeling. like something sitting at the foot of the bed, just watching. Last night I thought I saw it, just a shadow at first, between the blinds, standing motionless outside the RV, barely visible in the glow of the porch light I'd left on. I wanted to believe it was just a tree limb or a trick of light, but then it shifted, just slightly, forward, then back. Not natural, not swaying with the wind, intentional. I didn't wake Jess. I don't wake her anymore when I see things. I used to, God knows I used to shake her awake the second I heard anything. But now I just sit there, quiet, breathing shallow. Because if she sees what I see, if she feels it too, then we both slide a little further into that place we're trying to deny exists. In the morning, I checked the outside of the RV again, and there, pressed into the dirt where the light barely reached, were two impressions. Footprints, exactly. Longer, narrow. Toes that ended in sharp arcs like talons dragged through wet sand, too deep for a child, too wide for an animal. But the worst part was that the grass inside those impressions hadn't bounced back. It was wilted, dead, as if something toxic had stood there for hours. Later that day, I found something tucked into the exterior storage bay, wrapped in a crumpled piece of wax paper. It was the burlap cloth I'd thrown away back in Arizona. I never told Jess I'd gotten rid of it, never said where I left it, but there it was, folded, cleaned, placed with care inside the same compartment I'd locked. The symbol was still there, except that now it was stitched in red thread. Not ink, not paint, thread. We left the campground that night, but I knew it wouldn't help. It doesn't live in the land anymore. It lives with us. Wherever we park, it follows. It doesn't always scratch now. Sometimes it hums, sometimes it laughs, but not in a voice like ours. It's hollow, broken, like someone trying to remember how laughter works. And sometimes, late at night, I catch Jess whispering back. I ask her what she said, and she just blinks like she's come out of a trance. I was dreaming, she'll say. But I know she wasn't asleep. She hasn't been for a long time. A few days ago, I found her sitting under the RV, not doing anything, just sitting. Legs crossed in the dirt, eyes wide, face blank, like she was waiting for something to arrive. I asked her what she was doing, and she smiled, vacant, eerie. It's quieter under here, she said. We left that night, too. Again, but I'm tired of running, and I think it knows that. Because the last few nights I've been having dreams that aren't mine. Dreams where I'm not in my body, where I'm looking up at the RV from the outside, from beneath it, where I see Jess through the floor, watch her move, hear her speak, and in the dream I feel love, I feel hunger. I think it's dreaming through me. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how it gets in. Not through claws, not through windows, through memory, through repetition, through sound, through belief. I told myself we were safe because we kept moving. But maybe it doesn't care about geography. Maybe what it wants isn't to hurt us. Maybe it just wants to be us. Maybe it already is. Because last night I woke up to hear myself breathing again. But this time, Jess was wide awake, sitting beside me in the dark. And she whispered, "That's not your breath, Evan." And she was right, because it kept going long after I held mine. We don't talk about it anymore. Not out loud, anyway. We drive. We park. We sleep in shifts now. There's always one of us awake, though I'm not sure why that matters. It doesn't come when we're vulnerable. It comes when we're aware, when we're staring straight into the black and pretending not to see it move. We're in Virginia now, camped under a thick canopy of trees that let almost no light through. It's wet here, green, alive. The soil is rich, heavy, but even in all this living earth, it still found us. It doesn't need dust or silence anymore. It doesn't need the desert, because Monument Valley wasn't the start of this. It was just where we finally heard it. And maybe that's what cursed us. Not the rocks, not the circle, not the broken symbol or the shadow crawling beneath the axle. Maybe it was the attention. We noticed it, and in doing so, gave it shape. Jess barely speaks, not in a broken way, in a calm, too calm way, like someone who's accepted something horrible because the alternative is madness. And I think deep down she understands this thing more than I do. Or maybe it's simply bonded more deeply to her. I caught her again last night, under the RV, sitting in the same posture, same stillness. Except this time she was humming. It was soft, tuneless, but rhythmic. A sound I'd heard before, once, back in the desert, in the vents, when it hummed just before the first knock. I didn't say anything. I just watched from the window, afraid that if I interrupted, she wouldn't look up. Or worse, that if she did, it wouldn't be her looking back. Later, I asked her if she remembered being outside. She smiled. We needed to be closer. We? She didn't answer. I'm starting to forget things now. Not just where I put the keys or the last campground's name. I mean real things. A whole week disappeared. I checked my phone's photo gallery and there are pictures I don't remember taking. Videos of Jess talking to someone behind the camera, me, presumably, but my voice doesn't sound right. It's slower, drawn out, like a version of me pretending to be the real thing. I found a clip of her whispering into the floor vent. The audio is corrupted, just static. And then her voice, deep and soft. He doesn't sleep anymore. We're almost ready. That was 3 days ago. I confronted her. She didn't deny it, just said, "We're getting hollow, Evan. That's what it wants." And when I asked what it was, she looked me in the eye and whispered, "It's older than land." It waited for a door. I lost it, yelled, demanded answers. She looked at me like she pitied me, like I was still clinging to some fragile story about safety, rules, the way the world's supposed to work. We've parked somewhere off-grid now, not far from the Blue Ridge Parkway. The trees creak like bones, fog rolls in early and doesn't lift until noon. Last night I went outside. I don't know why. Maybe I was sleepwalking, maybe I finally cracked. But I woke up underneath the RV, lying flat on my back, and I wasn't alone. There was something beside me. Not touching, just there. A presence. Thick and electric. The smell of it hit me instantly. That same copper rot, but deeper now, like it had ripened. I couldn't move at first, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. All I could do was listen as it spoke. Not in words, not in language. But I understood. It spoke in memory. Flashes. Jess laughing in the snow in Utah. My dad's voice, the last time we talked before he died, the way my dog used to curl at my feet as a kid. And then, worse memories. The fight I had with Jess in Texas, where I almost left. The kid I bullied in 7th grade. The time I lied to my mom about seeing my brother sneak out and he got grounded for weeks. It showed me all of it, like it had been watching forever. Like it knew the deepest folds of who I am. And then it made me an offer. Again, not in words, but I understood. It wants a name. It wants a place. It's tired of hiding beneath. It wants to ride above, and all I have to do is let go. Give it the wheel. Let it steer. I woke up in the morning, mud-soaked and shivering, face up beneath the rig, mouth full of dirt, eyes wide with something I don't know how to name. Jess was already awake, sitting at the dinette, writing. I asked her what she was doing. She looked up slowly and said, "It's almost time to stop running. And now I'm writing this. Not because I think we'll make it out, not because I think anyone will believe me, but because if you're reading this, if you've parked somewhere quiet, if you hear something brushing beneath your tires in the night, don't look under the RV, don't listen at the vents, don't ask your partner if they heard it too, because that's how it starts. That's how it sees you. And once it sees you, it never forgets. It waits. It whispers. It becomes. And the next time you wake up behind the wheel, you may not be the one driving." End of script. Approx. 7,100 words. It started with the sound of gravel under my tires, the kind of crunch that feels oddly final when you're pulling off a forgotten road into the wilderness. There was something about that stretch of forest just outside the Allegheny Plateau in northern Pennsylvania, something that seemed to breathe, not like air through trees. No, like breath. Slow, deliberate, and old. I felt it before I saw it. Before I even killed the engine of my 1986 Volkswagen Westphalia, I had the unmistakable sense that I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, but I ignored it. That's what we do, right? We second-guess ourselves and chalk up instincts to nerves. I was on day 4 of a solo camping trip I'd planned for almost a year, and I was determined not to let irrational fears ruin it. This was my break from everything. My job in Pittsburgh, the crumbling marriage I hadn't told anyone about yet, and the silent dread I woke up with every morning, like my life was slipping out from under me one choice at a time. The woods were supposed to be the reset. I'd been camping in the VW since I was 19, following my uncle's footsteps in every dirt road the Park Service tried to hide. But this place, this narrow, overgrown path hidden behind 2 rusted barrels and a trail marker eaten away by time, wasn't on any of the maps I carried. That should have been a red flag. Instead, it felt like a discovery, like a secret I'd earned. I parked the Westie on a small incline, surrounded by dense red pines and cold birch, the type that grows so close together it strangles the light. The sun was already slipping behind the hills, casting a burnt orange hue over the canopy. I got out, stretched, and immediately noticed the smell. Earthy, but more than that. Damp, acidic, like the forest had been holding its breath for years and had just exhaled. There were no other cars, no signs of campers, no ranger stations, just me and the silence. I set up camp in a small clearing just downhill from where I parked, laying out my portable stove, my food box, and a collapsible chair I dragged all the way from home because I refused to sit on the ground. I made coffee even though it was too late for it. Just something about the ritual, the smell, the warmth in my hand made the place feel less like a mistake. The first sign that something wasn't right came when I tried to get my bearings. I always do a loop around any campsite I choose. Learn the landmarks, see where the sun sets, where the shadows creep. I stepped 30 feet away to relieve myself behind a log, and when I turned back, I couldn't see my van. Not just couldn't see it, couldn't find the trail I'd taken. Everything behind me looked like the same stretch of forest. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like someone had tied a belt around my ribs. But I stayed calm, took a deep breath, counted to 10. I knew better than to panic in the woods. I circled back, careful, retracing each step like I'd done 100 times before. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The light was dying fast. And then, there it was. My Westie, just barely visible through a sliver of tree line, but standing right where I'd left it. I laughed out loud, nervous relief more than anything, and scolded myself for getting jumpy. The woods do that. They shift, they test you. That night, I slept with the windows cracked open. The air was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of moss and something metallic. Not blood. Something older. I tried to ignore the scuffling sounds around the van. Probably deer, I told myself. Definitely not raccoons, maybe squirrels or some other night animal. But when I opened my eyes around 2 a.m., I knew something had changed. The woods were dead quiet. You don't know real silence until you've sat awake in a forest where even the insects have stopped singing. No crickets, no rustle of leaves, nothing. Just a static buzz in my ears and the sharp, uneven sound of my own breath. Then came the knock. 3 taps. Deliberate. On not a branch. Not an animal. A knock. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. My eyes were locked on the rearview mirror, but all I could see was black. I reached slowly toward the flashlight in the glove box, hands trembling so hard the latch clicked louder than I wanted. I turned it on, heart hammering, and swept the beam toward the back. Nothing. No eyes. No shape. Just fog on the glass. Fog that hadn't been there when I closed the curtains earlier. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Sleep deprivation, adrenaline, maybe even a dream that felt too real. The human brain is a messy machine when it's out of its comfort zone. I made a strong pot of coffee, packed up my chair, and tried to laugh at myself. But I didn't laugh. I just stared into the trees, waiting for them to blink. I told myself I'd leave that afternoon, head back toward a known trailhead, something with an actual sign or other campers. But before I could even take down my food box, I heard it again. 3 knocks, not on the van this time, on a tree, 50 yards to my left, then again, closer. 3 more. The sound was precise, rhythmic, human. I called out, thinking maybe someone had wandered into the area. Nothing. I stepped a few feet toward the sound. Nothing. No movement, no response. Just the breeze tickling the pine needles and the tightening sensation crawling up my spine. That's when I noticed something I hadn't the day before. There were no birds, not flying overhead, not chirping, not a single rustle in the canopy. Just that thick, oppressive silence, like the woods were holding their breath again, waiting. I grabbed my small day pack, just water, granola, compass, and my old handheld GPS. I decided to hike out a few miles, see if I could find a nearby trail, something to ground myself. I left a bright red bandana tied to the side mirror of the van so I could find my way back. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't have known, is that I wouldn't find my way back, and that red bandana wouldn't be there when I returned. If I returned. because the forest had already started closing behind me. At first, it was easy to believe I just wandered farther than intended. The trail I made for myself had a strange way of blending back into the woods the second I stopped looking over my shoulder. I walked with careful intention, marking trees with little shreds of orange flagging tape from my pack, keeping the sun behind my left shoulder. That was always the rule. Orientation through sunlight. But even with all the caution, something wasn't tracking. Every step forward made the woods feel tighter. Not denser, exactly. More constricted. Like the trees were leaning in. Like the path I was making was just a figment that would evaporate the second I looked away. There were no animal tracks, no broken branches, no natural sounds at all. Just my boots grinding into damp earth and the rhythmic whistle of my breath. I knew when I'd gone too far. It was that moment every seasoned camper dreads, that flicker of uncertainty in the gut. I turned to head back toward the van, following my flagged trail. I walked for 10 minutes, 20, 30. No red bandana, no van, no trail. I turned around, thinking maybe I'd just taken a wrong angle. I backtracked to the last bit of tape I'd left behind. Gone. All of it. Gone. Like I'd never marked anything at all. I remember standing there for several long seconds, listening. Not for something specific, just listening. The way you do when your body starts to register that you're no longer on familiar ground. That something about the rules has changed, and the usual logic of direction, time, and space doesn't apply here. The hair on my arms rose. The compass in my hand spun once, then slowly pointed south. I tapped it, shook it, south again. But I knew the sun had set behind me on the hike in, and that meant the compass was lying, or something was interfering with it. I pulled out the old GPS. It struggled for a few seconds, trying to connect, then blinked out. Dead. I had fresh batteries in it just this morning, and still nothing. No signal, not even static. That's when I started walking. Fast, no plan, just movement. The kind of movement you use to push panic away. Forward, forward. Just keep going. I convinced myself if I went downhill long enough, I'd hit a creek, a trail, maybe a ranger road, something. But the forest didn't lead me anywhere. It just kept folding into itself. Hours passed. I stopped once to drink, eat half a granola bar. My knees ached and my thoughts spiraled from rational to chaotic and back again. I was angry, then terrified, then numb. By the time the sun dipped low enough to shadow the forest floor, I knew I was truly lost. Not just turned around. Lost. The kind of lost where you stop feeling like a person and start becoming part of the woods, where time gets muddy and the horizon never opens. And then I heard it. Not a knock this time, a voice. It was faint, feminine, almost a whisper, but so close it felt like it was being whispered into the base of my neck. It said my name, not a shout, not a question, just Jake. I froze so fast I nearly dropped my bottle. Every muscle in my body screamed to run. But where? Into what? I turned slowly, scanning the trees. The sound had no direction, just presence, like it was everywhere at once. Jake. This time it came with a rustle, not of animals. Something heavy dragging through pine needles and brush. I backed away. I walked faster, then I ran. Full sprint through brambles and low-hanging limbs, ducking and diving until the forest blurred around me. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed to be anywhere else. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed and my thoughts became white noise. When I finally stopped, everything was quiet again. Dead quiet. And there, in a perfect circle around me, were the trees. I don't know how to explain it, but they weren't just there. They were watching. That's how it felt, like every trunk was leaning just slightly in my direction, like the branches were angled not toward the sky, but toward me. I took a step backward and noticed something that made my stomach knot. There were no pine needles on the ground. None. It was clean, cleared, like something had swept the area, or maybe something had made it, like a stage, like it wanted me here. I didn't sleep that night. I made a crude shelter between two thick tree trunks, wrapped myself in my emergency blanket, and kept my back against the bark. I clicked my flashlight off every few minutes to conserve power. Each time I turned it back on, I expected to see something, but it was always just trees, until the fourth time. That's when I saw it. A figure, 30 feet away, still as stone. Not an animal, not a person, not really. Tall, thin, draped in shadows that didn't match the shape of the trees. It didn't move, not even when I raised the light and hit it full beam. The flashlight flickered, then died. The only thing I heard was my own breath coming out ragged. I didn't scream, didn't move. Then it took a step toward me, just one, and everything in me shattered. I bolted into the woods again, no plan, no path, just raw animal instinct to flee. Branches tore at my arms, scraped my face. I hit a slope and tumbled hard, rolled through moss and mud until I landed on something hard. A trail marker, an old wooden signpost barely readable, McCready Ridge 1 mile. Civilization, a real trail, and just beyond it, a glint of chrome. My van. I ran to it with every ounce of strength I had left. Threw the door open, climbed in, slammed it shut. The red bandana was back on the mirror, tied in a different knot. I stared at that red bandana for what felt like hours, my fingers still trembling on the ignition key. It was the same bandana. I knew it from the tear in the corner and the faint oil stain that had never come out. But the knot, I hadn't tied it like that. Mine was a simple single wrap, a camper's knot. This one was tight, deliberate, looped through itself in a way I didn't even know how to do, like someone had tied it with purpose, with knowledge. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not with the van surrounded by shadows that no longer felt like trees. The headlights stayed on until the battery dipped dangerously low. I didn't care. I needed light. I needed something to push back against whatever the hell that thing in the woods was. I sat with my back against the driver's seat, a small hunting knife clutched in my hand like a child gripping a nightlight. Outside, the forest was silent again, but not still. Every so often, a branch would shift, subtle, a faint rustle in the pine bed. No wind, just movement. Controlled, slow, and patient. By dawn, I'd made a decision. I was leaving. Screw the trip. Screw the idea of finding myself in the wilderness. The only thing I wanted now was pavement under my wheels and distance between me and those trees. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine clicked, but didn't turn over. Again. Click, click, silence. The battery wasn't dead. I had juice. The lights were still on. The dash lit up. But the engine refused to catch. I opened the back hatch to get a better look, cursing under my breath. That's when I saw it. 3 long scratches. Down the side panel. Deep. Not paint deep. Metal deep. Like something had clawed the side of the van during the night. I dropped the hatch, grabbed my gear, and I ran. I left the van there, my pride and joy, my little home on wheels. I left it in the clearing, gutted and silent, because I felt that staying meant dying. Or worse, disappearing into that forest like it had always been, waiting for me to arrive. I followed the trail marker I'd seen the night before. It had been a mile to McCready Ridge, surely a ranger station, a service road, something. I walked fast, resisting the urge to run, but after 20 minutes there was no ridge, no signage, nothing but trees. And then the trail disappeared, not faded, vanished, like the dirt had never been disturbed, like the path had never existed. I turned back the way I'd come. That's when I saw the marker again. McCready Ridge, 1 mile. But now it was behind me. Same post, same angle, same splintered wood. I was walking in circles, or the forest was folding. I stood there shaking, trying not to scream. That's when I heard footsteps, not rustling, not animal patter. Footsteps, crunching dry leaves, pacing, deliberate. I held my breath, crouched low, scanned the brush. Nothing. Then a voice. Same one as before. Jake. It sounded closer. Come back. My heart stopped. Then another voice. A different one. Jake, please. And another. Younger. Jake, I'm cold. They were using my name. They knew it. But I hadn't told anyone where I was going. No shared pins. No social posts. Nothing. This trip had been radio silence. Intentionally. So how? I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the spot where I thought the voices were coming from. And that's when I saw it again. The figure. Same height. Same shadowy edges that didn't make sense. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were 3 of them, lined up between the trees, perfectly still. No eyes, no faces, just voids in the shape of people. I turned and ran, again. But the forest didn't let me far, because within minutes I stumbled, tripped over a root I hadn't seen, fell hard, rolled through underbrush, and landed flat on my back, staring up into the canopy. And there, above me, barely visible through the gaps in the branches, was something that didn't make any sense at all. A fire tower. Old, wooden, half-rotted, but real. I scrambled to my feet and ran for it. My knees were bleeding, my arms torn from thorns, but the pain didn't register. I reached the base of the tower and started climbing. Every step creaked under my weight. The ladder was weathered, some of the bolts rusted to orange. Halfway up, I looked down. They were at the bottom, all of them. 6, maybe 7. Dark figures. Not climbing, just watching. I reached the top and slammed the trapdoor shut behind me, locked it with a rusted bolt that took all my strength to force into place. Then I collapsed and cried. I cried like a child, loud, shaking sobs, because for the first time I realized I might die in these woods. Not from exposure, not from hunger, but from them, whatever they were. And yet, when I finally looked up, I saw something I hadn't in 2 days. A road, faint, distant, but visible. Just a sliver of gravel snaking between trees a mile or two out. Hope, real hope. I stayed in that tower until dusk. The figures never climbed, never spoke again. They just lingered at the base, silent, until they vanished, one by one, into the trees. By nightfall, they were gone. I didn't sleep that night, but for once, it wasn't because of fear, it was strategy. From the top of the tower, I watched every tree, every shifting shadow below. I clutched my knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, and stared out over the forest like a prisoner waiting for the guards to change shift. Every branch creaked like a whisper. Every gust of wind sounded like breath at my neck. But the shadows didn't come back. The figures didn't return. For the first time since I'd turned off that hidden path, I felt like I had a choice again. Like I had a direction. And in that tower, in the dark, I made myself a promise. If I got out of this alive, I would never ignore my instincts again. I would trust the unease, the gut, the internal siren that says, "Don't go further." I waited for light, and when it came, soft and gray and filtered through mist, I climbed down, slowly, like every step might be the last. I expected them to be waiting for me, but there was nothing at the base. No footprints, no signs, no claw marks, only silence. I took the slope down from the tower fast, not caring about the cuts or bruises anymore. The road I'd seen from above couldn't have been more than a mile out, maybe a bit more if the terrain shifted. But it was real. I'd seen it. A way out. And the whole time I moved toward it, the forest felt different. Not safe, but less interested. Like the game was over. I broke through a dense wall of underbrush around noon and hit the road like it was a lifeline. It was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles, and cracked with age, the kind of forgotten access lane that loggers or forest rangers might use once a year. But it was something. I followed it downhill for a few miles before I saw the sign. McCready Station, 2 miles. Station. Ranger. People. I almost collapsed from relief. I don't remember most of that walk, just blurs of trees and the rhythmic smack of my boots against gravel. My legs moved on their own like they were being pulled by gravity and adrenaline. McCready Station wasn't much, just a wooden structure with a radio antenna, 2 vehicles out front, and a cabin-style lookout with the shutters drawn. But to me, it looked like a palace. When I got close enough to shout, I yelled for help. Not screamed, just loud enough to be heard. My throat was raw, my lips cracked. I looked like hell. Blood, dirt, pine needles still in my jacket collar. A man in a Forest Service uniform stepped out of the cabin, coffee mug in hand. He froze when he saw me. "Jesus," he said. "Where'd you come from?" I told him everything, or tried to. The woods, the van, the trail that vanished, the figures, the bandana, the voices. He didn't say much while I spoke, just nodded, listened, let me empty the panic. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Can you show me where you camped?" I didn't want to. Every part of me wanted to say no. But part of me needed to prove it wasn't just some nightmare, some fugue state triggered by stress and solitude. So I nodded. He got another ranger, a younger woman named Natalie, and together we drove back up toward the access road, then hiked the old logging path I'd taken in. But when we reached the clearing, my van was gone. Completely. Not just missing. Vanished. No tracks, no oil stains, no crushed grass or broken branches. The clearing itself looked untouched, like no one had been there in a decade. I stood there in disbelief while the rangers exchanged a glance. I could see it in their faces, that quiet, practiced neutrality, the kind they use when they think someone's unstable or lying. "I swear it was right here," I muttered. Natalie bent down, ran her fingers through the mossy ground. "You said you left a red bandana?" "Yes." "Where exactly?" I pointed to the tree I'd tied it on. She stood, held something in her hand. It was a bandana, but not red. It was black, same size, same shape, but black and covered in strange white symbols I didn't recognize. I stepped back. Cold shot through my arms. "Is this yours?" she asked. "No," I whispered. The male ranger spoke then finally, his voice low even. "McCready Ridge used to be a fire tower post. Shut down in the 80s. You're the first person to mention it in years." "I slept in that tower," I said. He shook his head. "That tower collapsed during a storm back in '96. "I slept in it," I repeated. "I climbed it, locked the hatch." He looked at me for a long moment. "We'll file a report, but you should know this isn't the first time someone's come out of these woods saying things like this." "Like what?" He paused. Then, voices. Lost time, paths changing, things watching from the trees, vanishing campsites. I felt like the world was tilting. "You're telling me this happens?" He didn't answer. Natalie finally said, "Most don't make it out. You did." And I didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. They drove me back to the station. I gave my statement. They offered to call someone for me, but I declined. I needed space. Time. I stayed in a small motel on the outskirts of a nearby town that night, lying on the thin mattress, listening to the hum of the mini fridge. I thought I'd dream of the woods. Instead, I dreamed of the tower, and of something standing just beneath it, staring up through the planks. I didn't talk to anyone for the next 3 days. I checked into that motel under my middle name, kept the curtains drawn, and stared at the ceiling like it might split open and tell me what the hell had happened back there. I didn't shower, barely ate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those trees, angled like they were leaning toward me, waiting. I heard the voices. My name, spoken in the exact tone my sister used when she called me in from the yard as a kid. The same rhythm my ex-wife had used when we used to camp together before everything broke. They weren't just calling to me, they were mimicking. That's the part that sat in my gut like ice. Those voices weren't real people. They weren't ghosts or hallucinations. They were copies, impressions. Something had studied me long enough to get the cadence right, to wear my memories like clothing, and they almost got me to follow them. After the third night, I finally turned my phone back on. I'd left it in airplane mode the whole time. Intentional silence, part of the reset. When the signal hit, I expected dozens of messages. Family, friends, work. There was only one. It was from an unknown number. "Jake, you left the door open." I stared at it for a long time. Didn't reply. Didn't breathe. I just dropped the phone on the motel bed and backed away like it was toxic. How did they get my number? Or worse, was that even a text? I left the motel at sunrise, drove 2 hours south without looking back. But the questions followed me, clinging to my shoulders like fog. Where was my van? Who or what had left those claw marks on it? And why did the Rangers treat the whole thing like it was part of a pattern? I couldn't let it go. You don't just walk away from something like that and pretend it didn't happen. There was a knot in me now, deep, bitter, and cold. It pulled tighter every time I tried to tell myself it was over, so I did what no sane person would do. I went back. Not to the woods, not yet, but to the town nearest the trailhead, little place called Elbridge. One of those forest towns that exist more on memory than maps. I found the ranger station again, McCready Station. The same ranger was there. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You're not the first," he said when I asked him if the Forest Service knew more. "Won't be the last either." "But what is it?" I asked. "What's in those woods?" He didn't answer right away. Just poured another cup of coffee and sat across from me at the table. I remember his hand shook slightly when he lifted the mug. "There's no real name for it," he said. "Some of the old-timers call it the Fold. Others say it's the Hollowwood. Locals know not to go off the marked trails, especially not alone, especially not during the fog season. What does it want?" He met my eyes. "Sometimes it wants you to stay. Sometimes it just wants to see what you'll do when you're afraid." I felt cold again, like I was back in that tower, surrounded by trees with something smiling in the dark. "I saw the fire tower," I said. "I climbed it. You told me it collapsed." "It did," he said. "In 1996, we found the top of it half a mile away, like something picked it up and moved it." "You think the forest's alive?" He took a slow sip. "I think some parts of this country are older than we understand, and some woods aren't just trees." That should have been the end of it. I should have left that station and driven west, and never looked back. But before I left, he handed me something. a folded piece of paper, thin, yellowed with age. It was a copy of a map. Hand-drawn, the lines on it were erratic, loops, spirals, a strange triangle where McCready Ridge used to be. In the center was a symbol I didn't recognize, like a maze or an eye. People who get lost out there, he said, they come back changed, or they don't come back at all. But you got out. That means something. I didn't ask what. I already knew. I left town that night, drove until my eyes ached, slept in rest areas with the windows rolled up and a crowbar beside me. I didn't care how crazy I looked, and I haven't been back since. But sometimes, when I park in remote places, when the woods get too quiet and the birds go still, I feel it again, that pressure, that breath, that sense that something out there remembers me, that I didn't really escape, that I just made it out, for now. And sometimes when I look in the mirror after a long night on the road, I think I see something behind me, in the shadows of my camper, in the space between curtain and glass. It never moves, but it's always, you don't come back from something like that unchanged. Not really. You can pack up your gear, dust off your boots, drive to safety. You can sign statements, give coordinates, even convince yourself it was all just some awful stress-induced psychotic episode. But the woods keep something, always. And I think they left something with me in return. It wasn't obvious at first. But about a week after Elbridge, strange things started happening. Little things. My Westie reappeared. I'm not kidding. It was found 2 states over, parked just outside a ranger gate near the Monongahela National Forest. Locked, undamaged, no signs of a break-in, just sitting there like it had rolled down the mountain on its own, found a road, and waited. The ranger who found it called me because he noticed the name Jacob H. etched on the inside of the rear hatch. I'd scratched it there during a long road trip with my wife years ago, a stupid little act of nostalgia. And yet, there it was. My van, with my gear still inside. All of it, except the bandana. The black one was hanging from the rear view mirror, tied in the same strange knot. I sold the van 3 days later. Didn't even clean it out. Just took what I could carry, left the keys on the dash, and walked away while a man from West Virginia wired the funds. It should have broken my heart. I loved that van, but it didn't, because I knew it had been somewhere I couldn't follow, somewhere that warped it, the same way it warped me. Since then, I don't sleep well. I can't camp like I used to. The wild doesn't feel like home anymore. It feels like a door, one I accidentally opened, one that's still slightly ajar, and every time I dream, I'm back there, in that forest. But it's never the same trail twice. Sometimes the trees are smooth, white bark, bone pale, and endless. Sometimes they're black and twisted like they've been burned and never healed. Sometimes I hear the voices before I see anything, mimicking people I love calling from just beyond sight. Other times it's dead quiet, except for the sound of something breathing, low and long, like the forest is exhaling all at once. Once, I woke up and my fingernails were packed with moss. Another time I found tiny scratches under my shirt, 3 of them on my ribs, fresh, bleeding lightly. I live in a city now, small apartment, 2nd floor, no trees in view, and yet I still check the closet, because once I heard something knock, 3 times, from inside, and when I opened the door, the smell that hit me wasn't dust or mildew. It was pine, damp pine, that same heavy rotwood scent from McCready Ridge. I moved 2 weeks later, but you can't outrun it. You see, people think getting lost in the woods means bad navigation, no GPS, a bad map. They think it's about terrain, geography, human error. But that's not always true. Sometimes the woods decide. Sometimes they lose you on purpose. And when they're done with you, when they've taken their piece, they might let you go. But they don't forget. They wait. I tried to tell people at first, friends, a wilderness forum I used to post on. Even went on a podcast once, anonymous, voice distorted. I just needed to say it out loud. I needed someone to believe me. Most people thought I was lying or mentally unstable or high. One guy, he messaged me privately, said he'd heard of something similar in Washington State, Olympic Peninsula. A ranger out there had gone missing for 6 days, came back different, didn't remember where he'd been, just kept saying, "The path moved, the path moved." Another listener sent me a photo. It was a screenshot of an old newspaper clipping, barely readable. Local couple found after 8 days missing in forest. Speak of voice mimics and trees that watch. dated 1982. That was enough for me. I stopped talking. I deleted the podcast file, removed the posts, went quiet again. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that they don't like being named. Whatever's out there, whatever exists in the folds of those forests, it listens. It remembers. And I think it tests us. It waits for people like me, loners, wanderers, people trying to escape something. The lost ones, not just in the woods, but in life. We go looking for quiet, for meaning, and sometimes we find them instead. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed the voice, if I'd believed it was someone I knew. If I'd stepped into the trees just a little further when it said, "Jake, this way." Would I still be me? Would I still be? I don't have answers. All I have is this truth. The forest is older than we are. It has patterns we don't understand, and sometimes when we walk its edges, it walks us right back. I try to warn people now, quietly, subtly. A glance at someone's map in a trailhead parking lot, a muttered warning when I see a camper pull off toward a hidden trail. Don't go off path, I say. They usually smile, nod politely. But they don't listen. Nobody ever does. Not until the voices start. Not until the woods shift. Not until it's already too late. It's strange how quiet your life gets when fear becomes a permanent part of your wiring. I used to love the wilderness. Now I flinch when the wind moves through trees. I used to live for the sound of birds at dawn, for the damp chill of morning fog. Now, every fog bank feels like a veil about to pull back and show me something I wasn't meant to see. Sometimes I think I didn't really escape the woods. I just brought a piece of them with me. People ask where I've been, why I don't post anymore, why I stopped going to the Volkswagen meets, the overland events, the whole road life I used to build my identity around. I don't know what to tell them. Because how do you explain that a place rewrote you? That a forest found you, split you open, and carved something else inside? That night in the fire tower never leaves me. Not really. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed in whatever apartment or rental cabin I've temporarily made into home, I remember the way the figures stood still, the way they didn't move, because they didn't have to, like the fear was enough, like they fed off it. The worst part? I started recognizing one of them, the tall one, always in the center. Always just a little taller than the rest. It had my face. I don't know how long it had been watching me to get the details right, but it knew. The jawline, the slope of my nose, even the scar under my chin from when I fell off a bike at 9. That means it had been close. Closer than I ever realized. It makes you wonder how many nights you've really slept alone, and how many you've just believed you were alone. I don't tell this story to scare people. I tell it because most folks don't understand what it means to be lost. Not in the cute Instagram way. Not in the we took the scenic route way. I mean, lost. Lost. Gone. Vanished. Like the earth turned inside out and swallowed you and forgot to spit you back out. Do you know how many people go missing in national forests every year? Thousands. Some are found. Most aren't. Some leave footprints that stop mid-trail. Others are tracked by dogs to the edge of a clearing and then nothing. No scent, no body, no sign. Some of them, I think, are still there. Wandering inside that same fold I slipped into, calling out for help that will never come, listening to things that wear the voices of their loved ones. A mimic doesn't need to kill you. It just needs to break you. And those woods, they specialize in breaking people. I tried therapy. I really did. But what do you say? I saw a version of myself watching me in the trees. I climbed a tower that doesn't exist. I heard my sister's voice, except she was in Idaho, and I was alone. It sounds like madness, like sleep deprivation, like trauma, and maybe some of it is, but I know what happened, and I know this. If you step far enough into the wrong woods, they step into you too. Sometimes I still hear knocking at night. Sometimes I wake up and find dirt on the windowsill, pine needles inside my locked car. One time I found moss growing along the seam of my shower drain. Thick, dark, and wet. I scrubbed it with bleach. It came back 2 days later. Same pattern, 3 lines, like claws. I left that apartment within the hour. They say you can't outrun your past. I've learned you can't outrun the woods either, not when they want to keep you. Because they don't chase. They don't scream. They invite. That's the worst part. The invitation never really ends. It's in the back of your head when you're walking alone at dusk and the wind makes the leaves talk in that soft, hypnotic way. It's in the warmth of the campfire that suddenly feels just a little too perfect, a little too welcoming. It's in the voice that says your name, not shouting. So now, when I travel, I stay near highways. I keep a road flare in the glove box and a Polaroid of that clearing in my wallet. The photo's blurry, but the black bandana is there. And just behind it in the trees, if you tilt the photo just right, you can see a shadow that doesn't match the rest. I've shown it to people. Most don't see anything. One guy said it looked like a tree stump. Another told me it was probably lens flare. Maybe it is, but I know what I saw, and I know it's still watching me. Waiting. I sometimes wonder if telling this story is a mistake. Maybe speaking about it gives it power. Maybe it hears me. Maybe this is exactly what it wants, that I remember it, that I share it, that I invite others to come find the same clearing, the same bandana, the same empty space where the world bends in ways it was never meant to. But then I remember the message. You left the door open. And I wonder if it wasn't a warning, but a thank you. There's one last thing I've never told anyone. Not the cops, not the ranger who found my van, not the podcast listeners or the therapist who kept asking about childhood trauma, not even the man in Kentucky who bought my Volkswagen and swore he'd treat her right. It's the memory that wakes me up in a cold sweat most nights, like it's hunting me through sleep. It happened just before I found the tower, while I was still stumbling in that strange patch of woods, half drenched, scraped up, too exhausted to think. I came across a small clearing, and in that clearing was a tent. Bright orange, nylon, the kind you find in any big box outdoor store. 2-person, zipped shut, untouched. There were no footprints around it, no broken branches, just that same unnatural stillness pressing down like a closed fist around my ribs. I didn't call out. I don't know why. I think part of me already knew what I'd find. I stepped forward, fingers trembling, and slowly unzipped the flap. Inside, there was only one thing, a mirror, full length, old. The wood frame warped and rotted by moisture, the glass fogged at the edges like it had been breathing in that damp air for years. But it wasn't the mirror that made me stumble backward. It was what I saw in it. Me, but not me. Same face, same jacket, same scratches down the forearm, but he was smiling, not wide, just a tight little smirk, like he was in on something, like he knew how this story ended. I blinked, just once, and the tent was empty. No mirror, just pine needles. I ran then, didn't care what direction, didn't care about my compass or the map or the fact I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I ran like something inside me cracked open and let every old instinct pour out. And I think that's what saved me. I stopped thinking. I stopped resisting. I just moved. And maybe that's the trick. Maybe the ones who get taken are the ones who try to understand, who try to draw lines around it, give it shape, control it. But the woods don't work like that. You don't control a storm. You don't tame the tide. You survive it, if it lets you. Now, years later, I still get messages from strangers who find fragments of the story I left online. Some of them are skeptics, some are true believers, but a few don't ask questions. They just write one line. It happened to me too. Those are the people I worry about, because once you've been touched by that forest, once you've heard something wearing your mother's voice, or seen your own face looking back from the wrong side of the mirror, you start to wonder how deep the rabbit hole really goes, and whether it ever ends. Some nights I walk out to the edge of town. There's a park there, small, quiet, a trail that leads into a patch of forest no more than 2 acres deep. Nothing special, but if you stand there long enough, past midnight, you start to feel it. The wind stops, the air thickens, and if you listen carefully, the leaves begin to whisper in a language just outside your memory. That's how it starts. The invitation. You don't need a remote location or a cross-country trip. Sometimes the door opens where you are if it knows you're ready. I think about that bandana a lot, the way it was tied, the way it moved like it was breathing, like it watched me, like it knew I'd come. Sometimes I wonder how long it had been waiting in that clearing, if it had always been there, or if it followed me from somewhere else. I'll never know. That's the thing. You leave with more questions than answers, more fear than closure. but you do leave. That's the lesson no one wants to hear. You don't escape the forest by fighting it. You survive by surrendering to the part of yourself that understands it. The part that knows fear isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's instinct. It's the only reason I made it out. And if you're listening to this, if you're a traveler, a camper, a van lifer, someone who finds freedom in the wild, I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to pay attention. Listen to your gut. Trust your unease. And when the trail feels wrong, when the shadows stretch too long, when the woods go quiet, you turn around. Because not all places want to be found. And not every call for help comes from something human. So now I live my life between towns. Still wandering, but with shorter steps. Still driving, but not too far off grid. And every so often I get the urge to really go again, to disappear into some quiet valley far from lights and cell towers, to sleep under the stars like I used to. But then I remember the tower. I remember the knock. I remember the smile in that mirror. And I keep driving because I know the forest remembers me. And if I ever go back, it won't let me leave a second time.